Hey yo, what's up everybody? Dan Tom here, the Protect Your Neck podcast. You might know me from such films as, no just kidding, like MMA Junkie and work on the Action Network. Shout out to the Prop Squad who hit 3 on our sheets this week. But in this year program, the Protect Your Neck podcast, we break down high-level MMA, but in a slightly different way. It's going to be a recap, an after-party edition. And like for the first time like since summer, I will be having a beverage, some ranch water that I'll blame on the Verbal Tap podcast. Kevin Phillips for getting me, giving me a taste for it. I've been a good boy, so I'm treating myself tonight, and I'm treating you guys because you're not just stuck with me. That's right, I'm bringing on a guest, one of the guests who I shout out all the time on the show because he is just one of my favorite analysts, and I'm glad to have him back on this program. That's Ryan Wagner. That's at RyanAWagSystema on Twitter. Of course, of the Fight site. That's thefight-site.com, where he actually, they've been actually making him go back to work. Maybe we'll talk about here when we get to the Chandler fight. What's up, Ryan?
Hey, not too much. Doing pretty good. How about you, Dan?
I'm good, man. I'm good now. It's nice to be able to chat with you. It's nice to be in the black from a bit of a gambling perspective. So forgive me when I recap those results and mix that in our conversation here, Ryan. But more importantly, back to our conversation and me and you here. It's just nice to not kind of feel crazy, when you make analysis or the not fun part of analysis, which is the prediction part. Like whether you bet or into betting or not, like. I'm sure you can relate, Ryan. Like you understand at the very least that analysis isn't about necessarily the prediction. I've talked about that with like Connor on the show before.
Absolutely.
You get it. So it's nice, like especially when your prediction is kind of like maybe not that popular and a lot of people you respect go the other way, and rightfully so, and no problem with that. By the way, we'll talk about that here. But yeah, I was like, oh, am I seeing crazy stuff? It's too much devil's lettuce. What's going on here, Ryan? And so it was cool to see Pereira come through. It's 2 R's. I've been fucking it up all week. Apologies, John Anik.
Yeah, absolutely. This was always one where like the basic dynamic, everyone kind of head down, where Izzy would probably be winning minutes, but obviously Pereira is always dangerous at any moment. And honestly, I think Pereira surprised me with how consistent his performance was here, aside from the grappling, which was very much less consistent. But on the feet, he was scoring pretty well. He was competitive with Izzy in moments. I honestly expected him to have more trouble getting to Adesanya on the feet, and to rely more on like creating those big moments rather than being able to just kind of needle him with little punches.
Yeah, that's funny you say that because, I'm someone who picked Pereira here, and I did by decision, and we'll talk about with what I was wrong about, mainly off the top, is that I was making one of the bold predictions that it was going to be a slow, boring fight, which I don't think was too bold a prediction, right? Like with, especially with Izzy and how he's been fighting, regardless of your opinion on it, and, the mental aspect, the psychology kind of going into this. Which I did hear one of my dessert podcasts, shout out to Heavy Hands, Miguel Class there, was talking about that. And I felt a lot less crazy hearing Miguel talk about that. So
I also thought that was pretty likely, yeah.
Yeah, and shouts to, speaking of amazing analysts there, Kyle Mack there from Combat Chronicles. He also a fight site. He's like Professor X. I don't know if Professor X ever leaves the X-Men at some point to fend for themselves. Dad. But yeah, he is Professor X. But yeah, no, like what you were saying there though. Like I expected him to have trouble closing the distance too, as somebody who picked Pereira, and he was throwing the jab, which I think is an underrated tool. Maybe not to someone like you or who has the eye for it, but generally the analysis was left hook. That's all we heard, right, Ryan? And he did have other tools that obviously people like yourself and many others are familiar with. So I was excited when he was getting those off, and I noticed that he was hitting to the chest and neck, which Glover was talking about post-fight when he kind of invaded the commentary booth because he was just dadded up, like excited, right, Glover? And he was saying our plan was to punch to the neck and chest, and he wasn't doing it, and he wasn't throwing the right hand until the later round, like we wanted him to, and that was something I was calling for, Ryan. Where I was saying not that obviously the left hook wasn't going to be there, but Pereira's proprioception is just so good. That's what I kind of attribute his knockout power and effectiveness to. He really is a good example of proprioception. And he can really, when he gets the timing in kickboxing, we've seen him really split crosses down the center, whether he's splitting punches or just like intercepting a kick and doing the whole line beats a circle to a big round kick up high, right? Like he just once he finds it, and it felt like it was there. And obviously I'm rooting. I've got betting interest, so I'm like doing the shouting at my TV thing. But it was kind of comforting to know that was actually there. The corner was too, as far as like. They figured the right hands off the jabs were going to be there, and I know everybody was very left hook focused. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, what you were saying about punching to the chest, that was important here, especially against somebody like Adesanya. So when he gets his back against the cage, he starts doing those rapid direction changes, the head feints, like juking, and what he's doing is trying to bait guys into committing to something. And as soon as they do, as soon as you commit your weight, he's going to slip out the side. Pereira, by throwing those to the chest, he's preventing Izzy from cleanly slipping. And like once you commit and he slips, he's outside your shoulder. That's pretty much it for him being on the cage there. He can just pivot around you. He can just circle out. He doesn't have to deal with that exchange anymore. But by doing that, Pereira was able to keep him in front of him. And then when Izzy did circle off, he would still be in his stance to follow up with a left hook or to circle with him. I was really impressed with Pereira's ability to pressure him to the cage. First of all, the first part of that in any fight against someone like Adesanya is dealing with the kicks. We saw in the Paulo Costa fight, Costa tried to come out aggressive and push him back to the cage and working combinations and all that. But every time he stepped forward, Izzy would just punt his leg. And he had no chance of doing any of that because he couldn't deal with the kicks. Pereira is somebody that could have struggled quite a bit with that. He's had trouble dealing with leg kicks before. Obviously being so lead hand heavy, most of his primary attacks require committing weight to the front foot, which leaves him open for somebody like Adesanya to kick his leg. But he did a great job pulling his leg back at the knee. It's kind of now that guys have been more on the calf kick, we've seen that as kind of a response. The Aldo versus Pedro Munoz fight being a good example, where guys will respond by, instead of checking, just kind of hinging their leg back at the knee. And because his stance isn't really conducive to checking, there's often a lot of weight on his lead foot. It's bladed, so he can't turn it out quickly. He would just hinge back at the knee, and he might take the kick, and it might knock him a little bit off balance, but it wasn't landing with weight on his leg, and he could just continue to advance. He also would square up his stance when he had Izzy on the cage. So if you have a more linear stance with your lead foot turned in, which Pereira often has as somebody who's pretty lead hand heavy and primarily a boxer. But when he got Izzy to the cage, he would square his shoulders and hips and often just skip along with him. So when Izzy did his rapid direction changes, if you're in your boxing stance and you're trying to punch, you'll just slip out the side. But Pereira would kind of abandon committing to a punch in that moment and just skip along with him in that squared stance. And he's not giving Izzy anything to work with to get off the cage. If Izzy punches back, that's fine because he's still there. He's forced to stand in front of Pereira and exchange. So he did a really good job just kind of occupying space and not letting Adesanya play his usual like circling and sidestep games.
Yeah, no, I noticed that too, and this sounds like a weird comparison because it almost reminded me when he started squaring up like a obviously different and much technically tighter, but almost like a Ben Rothwell. He just almost was lurching over Adesanya. Like obviously he's not like Hodor where he's got like you know he's like half his body is dead and he's slanted this way like Ben Rothwell would stalk opponents. Like I'm not making a direct comparison, but I did notice that squared stance. I like that you point that out there. And the calf kick, and that just kind of leg kick defense as far as the step back, the hinging at the knee, and those variations. It's funny because I was actually working those. Not just I don't just hit up my guy Ryan Wag here for some Muay Thai stuff, which I'm like obsessed with now, and like Really like using a lot of Sidichai body kick building and stuff, and that I've really taken onto that. But actually getting like coaches who come from Muay Thai, and we would do those drills, and it's great because that kind of kick defense, I would at least argue, or maybe for me, also parlays to a lot of the kick defense we're seeing more MMA guys do as far as pass-throughs for body when you start going up a phase or up a level to the midsection. It's just something about the movement and the defense. It tunes you in, and we're seeing guys I'm just seeing more people that are better schooled about that, which makes sense. I mean, the sport should be getting better and sharper. The information's out there, right? Another dynamic as far as the directionality. So against Whitaker, one of the things I talked about ahead of time of the rematch with Adesanya was that I felt that the fighter that would make the other fighter come forward would have an inherent edge in exchanges. When you look at kind of their raw history of both Whitaker and Adesanya as far as like their harder matchups, so to speak, or outright losses in Whitaker's case in MMA. But when I was breaking this down and looking at their kickboxing matches, because I heard a lot of people say that you could just throw them out the window and they meant nothing, and I felt that was really wrong for not just the psychology part. Shouts to Miguel, but mainly for Alex Pereira's sample size, because there's not much of a sample size to draw from. Right. And again, it's two different sports, obviously, but there are certain things which obviously, Ryan, when you do these deep dives and profiles, you can kind of, and for you gamblers out there, this is where it intersects with our analysis, is that if you're trying to forecast, improvements or certain performances, going back to look at their progressions may tell you a lot about that. Is it going to guarantee a result? Of course not. But it is going to tell you how capable they are of their learning curve, right? Obviously you're more apt to make these jumps in your young 20s to mid 20s, right? Statistically, but each his own. Everybody's different. You got late bloomers, the old young veteran trope, right? Or the early burnouts that you thought were going to be something. So I always think it's kind of important to go back. And when I went back to watch Ryan, I felt like that kind of analysis that I leaned on prior, I kind of threw that out the window when I was presenting this matchup because I didn't know. It felt like like the person, like they noted in commentary, the person who was coming forward was having the more success, as reductive but true as that is. Did you have any thoughts on the directionality beforehand and after seeing how it unfolded?
Yeah, coming in, I figured that Izzy would probably try to play off the back foot, just as it's been something he's been trending more towards as his MMA career has gone on. And I also expected Pereira to have more trouble pressuring than he did. And so I thought that Adesanya would be able to either intercept him coming in or circle out effectively once he had him on the cage. But Pereira did a really good job shutting that down for the most part. Izzy's most of his success, I think, in this fight, if I remember correctly, came more in open space, or at least when he was kind of a step off the cage. And then when Pereira was able to back him up, he spent most of his effort trying to fake him out and get off. And I thought that that kind of hurt Adesanya here, where it might have been a better idea to invest more in more committed feints or attacks in open space to buy some of that time and space that he could use to then circle off before he hit the cage. I think that they were both kind of giving each other a little bit of undue respect in certain ways. Neither had much success on the counter in this fight, and neither really established themselves to be like a really threatening counterpuncher. They're both throughout their career have kind of struggled to make that work as well, especially with Adesanya in his MMA career. People kind of think of Adesanya as like a devastating, potent, and incredibly skilled counterpuncher, and he is dangerous in certain situations. He has a good left hook when guys lose their feet in pocket exchanges or overcommit. But he really isn't like the kind of sharpshooter who's going to sit on the outside, pick off your jab, and punish you hard for throwing it. Pereira is the same way. He was more of a counterpuncher in his kickboxing, but in MMA he hasn't been as comfortable defensively seeing shots coming and sitting down on them with hard counters. So they were both kind of reluctant to commit that much in open space. And when they got to the cage, there were a lot of exchanges where they were kind of sitting in the pocket, feinting a lot, and then someone would just kind of throw out a jab, and it would freak the other guy out. And there was never really much threat of that being countered, but they were both kind of reluctant to do that. I thought especially with Pereira, he had a lot of success using his jab, both as a committed strike to sting Izzy in the pocket with, and just as kind of a light touching throwaway thing to get him to move. Um, but there was never really any threat coming back at him when he threw that jab,
Yeah.
and that relying on it more, using it to bait out more reactions and set up his big punches probably would have made that a lot easier for Pereira to set up his bigger shots.
Yeah, I agree, and I know a lot of people commented as far as theories with length parity, which is always kind of the elephant in the room, and I don't
Yep.
necessarily disagree with that, especially after seeing this fight, right? But what I will say it was, at least this is my, and feel free to correct me, and this was something I wanted to correct myself. When I was speaking of scoring, I do not regularly watch kickboxing, which I've said before, but I just wanted to re-clarify that. I have not done the work and the research to scoring or have the experience with scoring that I've done with MMA, which is not a ton, in comparison to some of my colleagues, right? But I just wanted to say that I'm not a pro in that or anything like that. But what I noticed when I went back to kind of do the deeper dive of their notable kickboxing matches, and I watched a lot more on Pereira this time, was that they both shared some common threads as far as fighters, and not just the same fighters like the Jason Wilnesses of the world, but as far as like, surprisingly sometimes not necessarily long fighters, but shorter, stouter fighters who had more pressure, Dutch style, low kicks, discipline, could work with a high guard really well, and could do certain things, and you would see that kind of common thread. And when I went to look at them against long fighters, which was something I wasn't as worried about, but I wanted to see long fighters, long jabs. I remember going back to look at that ahead of the Strickland fight just to refresh myself and familiarize with myself,
Yep.
and then obviously did it much more. And the length parity didn't seem to bother either as much, but particularly Alex, it didn't seem to bother him, which was another kind of plus going in here. Do you have any opinions as far as the length parities on either translations from kickboxing to MMA?
Yeah, it's been a while since I watched either of their kickboxing fights, but I remember Adesanya struggling a little bit with Yusri Belgarwi. And
Yeah.
Belgarwi isn't a very good boxer. He's mostly like kind of a knee or outside kicking guy.
Mm-hmm.
And the length did seem to give Adesanya some problems there. I do think that the length was important here for enabling Pereira's success, but the biggest thing with the length, I think, is that he didn't have to take an extra step to reach Adesanya, whereas somebody like Whitaker, his first step isn't going to close distance into his jab, so he needs to figure out some way to like feint his way into jabbing range, because he isn't setting up in jabbing range, whereas Pereira could reach out and touch Izzy. But that was also a lot to do with how he handled the pressure, how he was able to crowd him without succumbing to the leg kicks and threaten back at kicking range, and how he was able to consistently keep Adesanya in front of him on the cage.
Mm-hmm.
So while I do think the length was important in those exchanges, it was also very much to do with how Pereira was using it, how a lot of other guys Adesanya's fought haven't been able to.
Yeah, no, definitely. And even though there was some of that hesitancy to sit down in his counters, and there were some doubts as far as, how good is his footwork, and obviously the bigger cage would parlay to Izzy maneuvers and flexibility. Inherently, it wasn't just a good kickboxer, but it was a guy in Alex who could come forward and pressure counter with that dynamic, right? More popular, one of the most popular, again, completely different fighters, but McGregor, obviously a real popular fighter who could counter, but he did so pressuring. And we could nitpick, the footworks or approaches, but that inherent application back to the proprioception, at least that I speak of, just makes him really kind of have a knack to kind of figure things out in that space. So real quick, Kyle McLaughlin says, love how bold you were to pick Pereira, Dan. Thank you, sir. Alex jab was a major factor. Yep. In this fight, ramrod, no tell, didn't allow Izzy to dictate range and pace as he liked to. Took their toll. Yeah, I saw, who was it on the UFC had on their post show? Forgive me, I'm gonna get my guy Kyle upset if I get this wrong here, but I forget they had I forget a boxing alum, but he was comparing it to a Foreman Ali, a Foreman Juan. But I was gonna ask what the kinds of jabs, because it was more heavyweight jabs. I guess maybe you would some of the great heavyweights of old you would compare Pineda's jab to, but it's just something I want to see more. It really was a nice weapon, was it not, Ryan?
It absolutely was. I wish he would have thrown a little bit more combinations off of it. He was mostly using it as a single pot shot, but he did a good job both using it as like a light flashing strike to get Izzy moving out of position so he could follow him, and also switching it up and like stepping in deep and using it as a like that really solid ramrod jab.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Real quick shouts in the chat to Chris London, Theo C. Jr., James Kendrick, Zangang in the house. What's up? We'll talk about that next. I got a couple more points I want to shoot by, and I'll recap the numbers for you guys here in a second as everybody's piled in. I see my chronic combat conversations. Dan, I'm sad I came here to. It's all good, man. You know what? We'll try to cheer you up. I know. My guy Tyler is a big Izzy fan, and you know what? The stoppage. You know what? I know. A lot of people are always upset at these things. I know I definitely been on the wrong end from a betting and picking wise as far as the standing stoppages, because it's always funny. Everybody points out like I'm always asking for more standing stoppages, and whenever we get them, it's always like fights I bet on the wrong side. I'm like, yeah, or like I forget like
maybe not on that one then.
Like I forget I was rewatching. We'll get to Arce, but like I bet him in round 3 because like he finishes all tall guys in round 3 except Andre Uhl, who probably he should have finished in round 3 because the finish comes in round 2, and it was a standing stoppage that wasn't like anything like this, and it was also ironic because it was Chris Taioni, and I don't know if you remember Chris Taioni or familiar with that ref, Ryan, but he was the ref that was like allowing like a bunch of comebacks in like the first year of the pandemic, where like the Trevin Jones, Timur Valiev, I forget, but he was like it was like the same ref that was behind that.
I remember the Valiev Trevin Jones fight. Yeah, that was bad.
Yeah, he was like, it was like him and Keith Peterson that were just letting guys like Kumite rules out there. And so I was just kind of funny. I was like, oh, this ref, of all times we get the standing stoppage in MMA, it's the guy that's been letting people go life and death. All right. I love Chris Taioni, by the way, so he's a great local ref out here. But yeah, people were upset with the stoppage. I feel like, I think I saw our guy Kyle Mack, still works from his, I think Izzy and Izzy fans should thank Mark Goddard, who's an excellent referee. Betting bias aside, like, man, props to Izzy. I mean, how tough is Izzy, to just even try to stay on his feet in some semblance? But yeah, I didn't have any problem with the stoppage. I mean, those things were serious damage makers, and I want Izzy to be okay.
He was getting swarmed. He'd already gotten dropped, and when he got up, he wasn't intelligently defending himself. He was starting to slump over. I didn't have any problem with the stoppage.
Not at all.
I wouldn't have had any problem with it if they'd let it go on until he got more decisively put down. If you want to argue that it's a championship fight and that you should be a little bit more liberal with that, that's fine with me. But nothing bad about the stoppage, in my view.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it wasn't one of those things either where like he was just trying to be even or trying to balance out from what he did before. Pineda was saved by the bell, but like he wasn't like it wasn't like a situation where like that should have could have been stopped. Like we'll get to it, which I'm not upset about. I didn't bet or anything like that. But like for example, you could have argued that Poirier Chandler could have been stopped in round 1. You know what I'm saying? Like which is crazy for MMA fans. They're like, what? What are you talking about? He was still breathing. But we'll get to that here. Last but not leastly, I had. Not that it matters, obviously, because the scorecards were nil. I had Izzy 3-1 as well. I just felt like it was a lot closer. Maybe even round 4, you could argue was a lot closer than maybe people were giving credit for. And I wonder, I talk about this a lot, Ryan, the effect of commentary, right? And especially for someone like who isn't a fan favorite of Izzy, right? You know what I'm saying? Like I get it. But like even like Cormier at a certain point was like, he just randomly like it was like after it already happened in like round 5, and he goes, or like there was the round after Izzy almost got the finish, and Cormier just goes like he had a bet or something, like he goes, I wish he heard him and took him down. I wish he took him down with like earlier in the round. And it's like and then he didn't add on anything to it, and it's just like a weird awkward dead silence in the commentary booth, and it's just like, okay, DC, so you're pretty much saying you wish Izzy won. All right. Okay. This is what we're getting tonight. So and
they get overexcited a lot and aren't the most careful with what they say, to put it lightly.
Yeah, and like again, I scored it the way everybody else did, despite my betting bias. Even with my betting
Yeah,
bias, I was still scoring it for Izzy. But again, crazy Brian. Yet another card in combat sports where people attack the body, and it changed the tempo of the fight, especially if you know what you're looking at, and more often than not, affected itself in the result, even as a volatile sport of combat sports. And the people who compete in these combat sports, Ryan, will say that they would rather get hit in the head, in need in the head, than get hit in the body again because it hurts so
100%.
damn much. But yet,
Absolutely.
yet, call me crazy. And again, I'm not trying to read the scorecards from Jan O'Malley or anywhere else, because you could literally pick any controversial scorecard in MMA where you think this, everybody thinks this person should have won and this person lost. It's usually the big punch to the head that we don't really have a good clarity of impact is getting more weight than consistent debasing, showing visual effect from fighting spirit to debasing stances, multiple points of the written criteria. Yet that is constantly, on the wrong end of these scorecards. So I just
Definitely.
wanted to just
And
point that out for the
that's something we
umpteenth
hadn't
time.
brought up yet, but Pereira's body work was pretty significant, I think.
Yes.
He was hitting the body while at range in I think it was the third round, the one that Izzy wrestled him. He had that lovely sequence where he came in with a left hook and ducked right off of it, anticipating a counter.
Yeah.
Then used that to clinch Izzy and turn him around and set up a perfect body knee. It landed super clean, and it visibly backed Izzy off. And Pereira clearly thought he hurt Adesanya, and he probably did, because he immediately followed up with a straight to the body and then tried to kick
Yes.
it too.
Yeah, and
Uh,
he knew it because he was chasing, and like commentary was slow to pick it up. They're like, "Oh, whoa, Izzy's backing up here." Like, yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
why is he backing up, guys. It was almost like he's been getting hit with hard
just
shots
got hit with
on
one of the
three
most significant
levels.
shots of the fight.
Like, and that's the thing that always pisses me off too. I'm glad you brought up that knee to the body, because some of the most significant ones came when it was his back to the fence, and that's what I tell people all the time. Where it's not that you shouldn't grade these little knees. Shout out to my guy Dan Urban, who he calls them Logan Storley knees, referencing the Michael Venom Page fight, which I still haven't watched, but I just find it hilarious.
I haven't, but I
And
can visualize exactly what he means.
Me too. That's what I was about to say. Yeah, like I know exactly. Like obviously those should count, and obviously I would encourage a fighter I'm cornering to do something with the positions, right, under the sake of criteria. But something I always explain to listeners on here, and I'm sure you can second, Ryan, is that like the more leveraging knees, more often than not, you'll see is in MMA, especially with the cage and the way you can prop in position. And depending on underhook and context and yada yada, but the person with their back to the cage can actually land the harder knees.
Yeah.
But they're often to the body, and there's not a great view on them. And again, back to the value, the criminal undervalue, which is why people like me, you, Heavy Hands, Kyle Mack, Combat Chronicles, Fight Site guys are always screaming at the top of our lungs like body work, like like Glover and Yuri are almost knocking each other out, and it ends in a 5th round submission. And what does Glover attribute to it? He was hurt from the body. That's what messed him up from rounds prior. And I know the scoring can't account for that and this or that, but it's just like, okay, yeah, we can't account for that. But how many times do we play God and go, oh, that rocked him because Joe Rogan said he was rocked, and big punch go bang to the head? Like as if we don't take that liberty 1,000 times in a round the other way, right? But
It's so consistently a sticky point for judges, and it doesn't seem to get better.
It's tough, and I'm not, and I will defend, the good judges to the point of, like, obviously they're trained to grade body work and leg work, and there's plenty of examples where we can find where, like, they've done, it's clear, like, we can deduce that, okay, judging by their scorecard, they gave proper care to the leg kicks. But I just think it's one of those things where it's human, it falls into the human bias factor, which we see with effective striking and grappling, folks. We heard it, on commentary today, even, from someone I respect, where you just hear that thing where they go, oh, they can't decide to striking, and then it goes to grappling. It's striking first. It's like, no, it's what's being effective. It's effective striking and grappling. And even John McCarthy, who I love, and more than most and will defend, he gets this wrong, at least according to ABC and what they're currently teaching. So this isn't me saying it. This is according to the courses and the people, like active judges like Kevin McDonald teaching these courses are saying, which is where he goes, oh, the majority of the round take place on the round, then it's a grappling round. And I think that's poor language. Like, there's a common sense to that. It's like, yes, correct. If majority of it's striking or whatever, obviously we're grading the striking, or if it's on the ground, who is the more effective grappler. Like, there's a common sense part. Like, yes, but the way that it's worded so often is that you get this effed up version of telephone to now where people think like, oh, well, that means we don't judge the other part at all. The other part doesn't matter at all.
If you're sitting in guard for 2 minutes and 51 seconds, it's not like hurting the guy on the feet isn't going to be scored, isn't going to take precedence over that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's more of a common sense thing. Like, you know it when you see it, and that's kind of the annoying. I think we've kind of spun ourselves in a rabbit hole. I don't want to go into a scoring talk, but I felt like
Pajeda's body work throughout the fight
was great.
I thought it was pretty significant.
Talked about.
It's with Izzy doing the wrestling in round 3. There was a lot of potential for that to snowball out of control for Pajeda. He was probably not as fit to be competitive later in the fight as Adesanya, especially with Adesanya spinning around on top, and that body work consistently needling the body in the clinch in that range helped equalize that. It also did a really good job. He did a really good job of dissuading the clinch for Izzy, because that was clearly part of Adesanya's strategy, intercepting him with the clinch in the pocket and wearing on him. But while he was trying to go to that head and arm lock, it was kind of loose, and he wasn't really either committing to like all the way in or all the way out. He wasn't pressing in tight with the underhook and controlling him, or keeping himself in good kneeing range. He was kind of just hanging out in mid-range, and Pajeda was capitalizing on that with knees and body punches. And even if they weren't huge, he was keeping it up, the output consistently, making sure that Adesanya wasn't owning the clinch and couldn't just sit there comfortably and wear on him.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we push on to the next fight, I just want to get my guy Kyle here in the conversation. He says, best way to be, by the way, go subscribe to Combat Chronicles. Also Chronic Combat Conversations, who's in the house. You know, I know that those run kind of similar, so I just want to shout both. Anyways, Kyle Mack says, best way to beat Pereira is to push him back. Izzy in their first fight, Kishenko, for example, and you can see it in Alex's early MMA bouts. If you can push him back, you can blunt his attacks a bit. Thoughts on that, Ryan?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Kyle points out the Kishenko fight. It's a great example. Pajeda, he's a lot more dangerous on the front foot. When he gets pushed back, he has that really tall, kind of bouncy stance, and it tends to collapse. His footwork isn't as good on the back foot as it is on the front foot. So while on the front foot, he's great at pursuing you, keeping you lined up for his big hooks. He also has a consistent kick and knee attack that he uses to line guys up, so he can land his big punches. But on the back foot, he tends to stand up tall, step out of stance, and when he's swarmed, he often doesn't have as good eyes for counters as he does when he's pursuing. In the second fight with Adesanya, there's a lot of sequences where Adesanya is swarming him. He has Pajeda pressed to the ropes, and he's teeing off on him, and Pajeda isn't offering much threat back.
Yep, absolutely. Jim Karasu says, I'm a big fan of Izzy, but that was a fantastic fight from both. That's a great, healthy way to you know, be able to enjoy it, because it really is, you know, to a tweet you punted off on Twitter, Ryan. You know, it really can't be understated, right? Kind of in closing, give your kind of thoughts on that, as far as now that we saw the, I don't want to say, I guess third fight, depending how you cut it, right? Obviously, this is a different sport this fight's taking place in, but what are your thoughts now that it's over, and where do you see it going from here as we wrap this portion of it up and push on to the rest?
Yeah, I just want to point out that Pajeda is an absolutely elite hater, just unmatched hater energy. I've never seen anything like it in my life. He followed Izzy from sport to sport, whooping his ass.
Yeah.
It's literally like if Shannon Briggs had beaten the hell out of Vladimir Klitschko 3 times.
And it you know, and again, this is nothing against Izzy or John Jones, but they get brought up together a lot, and they both have that, like, they want to be someone's daddy energy so badly. And of course, at least Izzy, you know, credit to Izzy again. Shouts to Izzy, like what the broadcast said, 20% of the UFC title fights. I mean, this dude's had it on his back. He deserves to get paid. He deserves a break. I hope he's healthy. Nothing but good things here. But at least, you know, he's out there fighting, unlike John Jones, where he's just like posing his daddy or doing the thing where, you know, he's just tweeting and opportunistically like essing on people, and it's just like, you know, Izzy's out here fighting, and Potaton's out here Poton's actually out here being daddy. You know, daddy actually is home now. So there's that.
In like 6 years, Adesanya is gonna go to BKFC, and oh, look who it is! It's Alex Pereira.
Yes. Oh my God. Oh my God. That'd be so unfair to have him at BKFC. That's not even fair. By the way, last shout out to my guy AB Aaron Bronstead. I figured it was appropriate to bust out the Glover Garage shirts. Glover was just so excited. He was dadded up, just so excited for his boy. And we'll get to the rest of Glover's Garage because, you know, kind of like the movie Twins, you know, like Danny DeVito says to Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know, when he's talking to the scientists. And he goes, wait a minute, in order to make him, I'm just the crap that's kind of left over. You needed me to make that Greek god. You know, I'm not saying that about my guys Terminator Reyes, but we'll get there. Well, I'm just saying we'll get there because it wasn't a great night for them, right? It wasn't a great night for them. Yeah. We got a lot of Zang Gang. I know, Ryan with the BK. I know. I almost freaking died here, Kyle, when he said that. I'm trying to hold the show together here. Vibrant Zebra 1. Hi, Ryan. It's Armin. How do you see a rematch between Izzy and Alex going? We'll get that last question in before we go to appease the Zang Gang here.
Yo, what up, Armin? I think there is reason to believe it would play out pretty similarly. Obviously, who wins is up in the air, and I don't really have a confident lean on that either way. Mm-hmm. I think for Adesanya, what I would want to see is he's always shown like real hesitancy to link exchanges together. He always wants to like get in with a 1-2 and get out right away, even when there's openings to go further. I think that if he was able to commit more to sitting down on some punches and linking exchanges together like that, it would tip the scales kind of majorly in his favor. There were a lot of opportunities in this fight. There was one particular sequence. He came in with a hand trap too, and it landed, and he kind of like took a sec and reset and wasn't in good position. And Adesanya feinted like he was thinking about going in for another 1-2 and just kind of stopped and moved out. And I was just thinking at that moment, like, if that was Volkanovski, he was coming in with a hand trap too, pretending to move out and then pounding him with another 1-2. And Adesanya, he sets up these positions where he could do that really well, but he's reluctant to pursue them. And I think that if he can do that, bite down a little bit more, work more of his offensive boxing at range before he gets back to the cage, that I would favor him. But if he plays a similar game of kind of trying to needle from outside, avoiding Pereira's big offense, and being content to sit on the cage, it's hard to see somebody letting Pereira strike with him for 25 minutes, especially in like a better position where he has all of that space behind him and you're stuck to the cage and not getting caught at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my God. What if they book the rematch in the small cage at the Apex? Ryan?
Oh God, that would be so unfair.
Oh jeez.
Just making people fight Pereira in a phone booth.
He just has like flashbacks to the Jan fight as well. but yeah, that's just, oh my gosh. Okay, so real quick before we get to another new champ, which is champ again. Just real quick for the gamblers out there, went 7-7 overall. Not great. But with the way gambling goes, we can kind of creep over the finish line with not too shabby a numbers. 2-3 in straight plays, 1-2 in props, 2-4 in the round robin, which meant we went 0-1 in the long shot parlay, which is fine. We still came out in the black, which we needed. All it does is kind of keep me in this torturous game longer. It wasn't like a big winning night, but when you're just, feel like the shower scene from American History X as far as your betting recaps go, I'll take it. I'll take a winning night, Ryan. I'll take a winning night. So
hey, when you're up, you're up.
Yeah. Well, there's phrasing. Yes. Yeah.
That's my secret. I'm always up.
That's right, baby. It's a condom depot, and any phallic or erotic or kind of penile supplement. It is very MMA. That is very MMA. Oh, yeah.
We love those in this community.
We do. James Kendrick, Whaley working with the Hickman Bros and ADC bronze medalist Josh Hinger has seemed to elevate her entire game. I would agree, and I'm glad she's working with good people because shout out to my guy Clint McLean, Die Hard MMA podcast. I got to rewind it to hear it because it was like I was playing it in the background as I was doing stuff today, listening to some of my dessert shows, as I like to call it, after the haze in the barn. And he was talking about, I don't know if you guys heard of anyone in the chat, or Ryan, you heard of this, but I think Santino DeFranco is a really smart guy from what I've heard and what I've gathered from Fight Ready, where Whaley's done work. And he got word of him being asked to, kind of getting squeezed out politely. And it was after him suggesting that they really needed to work on the get-up game, and that wasn't up to snuff. And so there was worry, in other words, heading in here, that if there is any truth to that, is she working on the things she needs to work on? She was definitely more active and more urgent, and you had a bit of the up kicks, and Carla, which she was having to exert a lot. She was kind of exhausted or exerting a lot, so part of that had to do with it. Maybe she was a little easier dissuaded to let the action return. But did you see any massive? Obviously, there's improvements, and she got a crazy finish or whatever. We can talk about that. But did you see any improvements of her get up game and the scrambles?
I can't comment too specifically on improvements. I haven't gone back and watched Zhang's fights all at once, just as they happened.
Right. Sure.
So I haven't had the opportunity to really compare. I was impressed with her grappling though, but especially with how her striking process set all that up. I really liked how she established the little skipping lead leg low kick first to set a strike that Carla couldn't really attack because she couldn't. It was such a long distance strike, and Carla didn't have any weapons to counter that. So she was kind of left sitting on the outside and reacting to Zhang, and that let Zhang push her back at will. It let her set the distance and prevented Carla from getting in on anything clean. And it just gave her that little extra second. So when Carla did get in on a shot, she was in a strong position to either wrestle out of it or engage on her terms, because she actually kind of was willing to go into the grappling, which maybe could have been a mistake, but it turned out not to be here.
No, not at all. And it was kind of chaotic from what memory serves. So I don't even want to lay too firm of analysis. This is more reactionary. Shout out to my guy Kyle. You'll probably get a more gathered reaction from him, Phil, and Connor. As I'll give another plug and a shout to more people I respect, the Heavy Hands podcast. I'm drooling on myself here. Jesus Christ, Dan, get it together. But yeah, she and I kind of mentioned that, and I mentioned it with as far as and we could talk about that too with Poirier and Chandler, where it may sound crazy, Poirier taking down Chandler, or just trying to assert wrestling on him in any form, right? Wrestling pressure. And maybe the same with Zhang Weili. Obviously, first priority was defense, and that's what we were kind of focusing and trying to forecast on going into this fight. But things I mentioned, Ryan, basically for both those fights was that basically don't be surprised, especially as the fights go on, and they're getting the wars that they both thrive in. Both Poirier and Zhang Weili are fighters that kind of can thrive in those wars we've seen, right?
Yeah.
Is that don't be afraid if they just and again, obviously, Chandler, not Diego Brandao, not Michael Chandler as far as wrestling goes. But we've seen, I bring up that fight because it sticks up in my head where, when Poirier is beating up guys against the fence, if there's an opportunity to just take him down, even if he's not trying to get on top and take the back like he did with Chandler, but just to make him get up and beat him up. Poirier loves being the bully when he can. He hates it when guys like Khabib are doing it to him, but he has his own version of that. So I didn't think that was too crazy to call for, yeah?
For sure. And with Weili, it might have got her in trouble against a different type of wrestler or top game person, because she was kind of putting herself in some questionable positions. But her athleticism gave her a huge cushion here. She was just kind of muscling Carla around in a lot of those exchanges, and at times, Carla looked kind of helpless. She even got to the headlock on the ground, and Zhang just powered her way out of it. There was no chance for Carla to keep her down there.
Especially when she
She's
got to
just
that...
an insane athlete.
Absolutely. Especially when she got to that deep shot. And Ryan, I know you've been there. Anyone who wrestles has. To me, it's one of my favorite feelings. It's where they're deep on your hips, and you're almost down, and you're still able to kind of post and scoot and break... and break your legs and hips back from that position still, and that's got to be mentally and at that point physically just exhausting for Carla, right?
The fight didn't go on too long, but from those exchanges, I'm sure Carlo was wiped out by the time it ended.
Yeah,
And John
absolutely.
probably could have done that all night.
Yep, absolutely. That nothing is more diminishing and spirit breaking almost than a failed takedown. And so whether you're like heavily rooting for a fighter, I don't know if anyone else does this or any of the gamblers watching out there, how where this analysis we're talking about intersects. Where like if I'm rooting for a fighter, and sometimes there's those points right where it's like, and it could have happened with Pereira Adesanya, as far as if Adesanya had the cardio and was used to grappling. He could have used that bump that he got right from that top position that round and parlayed that momentum.
Yes.
But obviously he's not his body's his body's not accustomed to that. But yeah, it is crushing to miss on those takedowns. Ghost Phantom says, Dan, congrats on the Zhang sub prop. It was inside the distance prop. I didn't take sub, but congrats on anybody who did. It was nicely priced, like plus 1,000 or something. She was actually working on the Reaper guillotine, bridged Gilly from north south with Josh Hinger. Ghost Phantom, I believe, trains at Fight Ready as well. So I always appreciate his opinion there. Okay, awesome. All right, I didn't realize that. He says would have been cool to see that hit. Yeah, definitely. That would have been cool. She's so aggressive. I'm sure we'll get looks of like anything she's working on. She's a fighter where it's like unlike Rose, for example, like we'll see it. We'll see it eventually. Yeah. If pass or fail, she obviously, as the point we're talking about and Ryan brought up now with the wrestling offensively from her, like she's not afraid to do her stuff as well, which is good. I mean, I would argue, it could, like Ryan said, it could burn you. Like if she had a Damian Maya single leg get up to reverse positions, and then establish like a really heavy control, from there, then maybe not as good, right? To maybe you just don't even want to engage in there. Question from the chat. Jin Karasu says, Dan, what do you think of Whaley's improvements? Is it possible for her to improve more? Yes, of course. Everyone can improve more. Or has she reached her peak? No. I don't have her age off the top of my head, but she's not old by any means, by any metric. And she's athletically freakish as well, not to like paint broad brushly on that. But yeah, I imagine she still has plenty of improvements. I feel like if you ask people like me or Ryan or other analysts, the question we may be more interested in is she can do a bunch of cool stuff. That's not the question at this point, right? It's how is she going to form that? Can we see her funnel that into more concise pressure? Fighting for matchups. Can she show to kind of game plan and prepare for specific matchups? I think those are going to be more important questions. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, for sure. Her wrestling has seemed to improve in recent fights, and the offensive wrestling seems. She's definitely like kind of experimented with some different entries from her striking, different kinds of takedowns. She's, I think, about 10 years into her pro career right now, so there's probably a limit on like what exactly she can add now. And I think that the big thing with wrestling, if she wants to be more of an effective offensive grappler, is going to be tying it into her striking, getting into her high percentage takedowns as cleanly as possible, and focusing on like maximizing what she can do on top. And I don't remember too much about her last fight with Joanna, but I remember her doing a lot of really effective work there on top.
Yeah, no, she did. She definitely showed improved wrestling. She was like shelving against the cage, like just like finding like real natural transition stuff that she didn't necessarily show before, which I appreciated. She's usually going for like more outside reap stuff. She's showing more options and understanding, especially inside the cage, as far as getting that knee on the inside and creating kind of natural shelves in those small spaces. So yeah, like small details to like some of the technical finishes. Whereas like earlier in her career, she was more dependent on cage for her actual takedowns and getting them, cage and clinch, or a combination of those. Whereas she's shown like chains, open space, chaining from snatch singles, real much more diverse there. James Kendrick adds in on as far as while we're on the Zhang before we push on, says, heard an interview that she was working with unorthodox submissions with Josh Hinger. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah, I mean, obviously she was going for that. She went for a one-arm choke which I was kind of surprised she got, but it is. I know some people say that that's BS. That doesn't exist, or you're giving it away if you tap to those things or whatever. But we've seen one arm chokes in the UFC for multiple positions.
Some flyweight just hit it, didn't
Yeah,
they?
Dvorak.
Was it Brandon Royval?
Royval did a one-handed guillotine, and then Dvorak hit one on my guy, so I don't want to mention it because it's my friend, my coach there, who's going to be fighting soon. I think he just got another fight announced, UFC back from injury. Shouts to my guy Juan Camilo Renderos
nice.
there. But yeah, I mean, like we've seen technical lighterweight divisions. In other words, case in point, right? Flyweights and strawweights, right? It even exists down there. So yeah, we'll see what she can do with that work with Josh. And then James Kendrick said, should Zhang be working on her get-up game? I heard that same thing. You heard the same thing too, huh? With Santino. Kind of sad that he was kicked out. Again, I don't want to be spreading information here. I'm just citing what I heard and citing it as a kind of speculation. But yeah, we'll see. I don't know. There's not a lot. Thankfully for her, there's not a lot of wrestlers that will be testing that anytime soon. Tatiana Suarez, who I love, is no longer in the division, sadly, and I don't know what's going on with her. I hope she's healthy. But yeah, all right, I'm gonna push. I know there's probably still Zhang stuff. Actually, one last one here from Vibrant Zebra 1. I personally thought that she extended the wrestling exchanges at certain times and got away with a lot because of her strength / level of opponent. Zhang, that is. Thoughts on that, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm on board with that.
Yeah.
There were certain times where it seemed like disengaging would have been a better tactical idea, but it just kind of didn't matter because she was so much bigger and stronger than Carla. I was thinking of someone like Tatiana Suarez, where if she was doing that against her, like there were times when Carla just had like an ankle or just on the calf, and Zhang was kind of mid-limp leg, and it wouldn't have been pretty easy to disengage from there, but instead she kind of like sat down and tried to get into those crucifix things, which it was great. It did work, and it was really cool to see somebody pull off a choke from crucifix, because we see that often as a counter wrestling tactic, but I don't think I've ever seen anybody get a sub from it in the UFC.
Yeah, that was tough. Vibrant Zebra adds, not to interrupt, but just it inserts perfectly to where you're at. He says, I think the contention with the one arm choke is more that Whaley wasn't deploying any kind of strong body control, and Esparza didn't fight it correctly, kind of to the point of maybe the perhaps flimsiness or perceived flimsiness of that crucifix position to finish the choke from.
I think he's talking about when she was on her back. Like Carla, I think she kind of caught a kick or something, and then kind of got tied up where her arm was passed across John's center line and tight to her.
Yeah.
She was kind of like trying to work the back position while Carla was trying to tug it out. Yeah, that was a little bit messy on both of their parts there.
Yeah, definitely. And like as far as the last thing I'll say, one arm choke, it's something that I really am in love with, and I haven't been able to get to it because it's just tough to get to. But I work specifically with shout out to Rich Castro there, one of my jiu-jitsu coaches. But it's off of if you're a body triangle but don't have the body triangle, but you have like one leg across, which is usually a sign someone's going to go for the arm bar from back mount. And then you use kind of what would be like a wrist feed. And you use that to get the free leg to do like a kind of like a BJ Penn version, but it's a much more tighter version of that. And if you're able to establish that kind of a control from the back, then you can kind of start working for the one arm. They go to fight the hand, you grab it, you've got the cross wrist control now, and then you can go and kind of clamp. If it's gi,
you like leverage it on their shoulder and pull it across so you can get that squeeze.
Yeah, but there's so much checks and balances that have to be there for that in the first place, and obviously those weren't as visible or sturdy looking from that position. So yeah, maybe that's the contention on that. Great.
I will say that's probably a lot harder to pull off cleanly in an MMA fight than it is in like a submission grappling environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the only times I've really gotten to it was either gi or no gi, not in MMA gloves or MMA environment. That's for dang sure. And that's what I've been in lately. So I believe me, I've been trying. It's tough. It's tough. The gloves make things a lot more difficult, people. Than it is. Kyle Mack, sorry to say because I don't like disrespecting fighters, but given how she won the belt and how she fights, Carla was a bad champion. Hopefully that's her done from the title picture forever. Whoa, throwing
you can't see me
Carla
right now,
the
but
goat.
I'm shaking my head in disapproval.
The GOAT. He's disrespecting the GOAT after a dominant performance over Rose in that rematch. Never in doubt, Ryan. Right? Never in doubt.
Hey, you said it, not me.
I love it. You know what? It's gonna be a great episode of Heavy Hands because you're gonna have Kyle go scorched earth on Carla, and then Connor. He's still fucking banging, which I'm all about, by the way. Keep banging about that, Connor. He's still banging about like blaming Rose for it all, and like she needs to now face Karolina Kowalkiewicz and face her fears.
She needs to go back and face like 2015 or whatever it was, Karolina Kowalkiewicz.
Dude, it was not a good night for facing fears. You know, Izzy was 0-2 against Pereira. Chandler came into this fight. The reason why I thought he was going to wrestle, we're going to go to that fight now. Michael Chandler lost third round submission to Dustin Poirier. He said his goal was last 2 times he was at Madison Square Garden, Ryan, he ended up at the hospital. And I was like, oh, wow. So this was one of the rare times where I was like, Chandler may actually fight smart. And we'll get to Frankie Edgar, who was dropped by head kicks both in victory and defeat in both his 2 prior Madison Square. Well, he did not break that streak, of course. We'll get to that. But yeah, Poirier and Chandler, you did an excellent piece over there for the Fight Site Patreon, of course, the fight-site.com. You can find links to their Patreon and subscribe there for some extra content. I'll tell you what, though, even just subscribe to their podcast feed. It's also fantastic. But my guy, Ryan here, did some study with Chandler and some of his relevant matchups. He had some good southpaw study in there that we chit-chatted a bit about. What was your thoughts coming into this fight? Did you even have any kind of... it's hard to have strong feelings about a chaos match like this, but did you have any strong feelings you want to talk about and strong feelings coming away from it?
I didn't think too much about it coming in. Just the general sense that Chandler probably had a small window at the beginning to win it. And if he didn't, Dustin would take over. Chandler, he only really works well in explosive bursts or very clean exchanges. And Poirier is not the kind of guy to give you those. He's going to be constantly needling you with throwaway shots, baiting your reactions, countering, and interrupting your rhythm. You're not going to be able to get those, get in, hit him a couple times, get out. It's just not going to happen against Poirier.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about Chandler that really made me not worry for him in this matchup, because I wasn't exactly rooting for him, but like be hesitant to be confident in him or anything, is that I thought he probably needed a clean like one-punch KO to finish Dustin. Chandler, when he's trying to finish guys, I don't know if you've noticed, but he never uses his hands on defense. Most guys, even if they aren't defensively minded, when they're in pocket exchanges and things get chaotic, they'll cover up a little bit and just to like take the heat off punches, deflect something in flurries. Even if they're not seeing everything coming, it still kind of helps you weather some offense and get off your own shots. Chandler keeps his hands like right down when he's following up. So I was thinking that if he hurts Poirier and he doesn't dust him immediately, then he's going to get hurt back trying to flurry on him.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it had to have been a one clean shot too. I know people were pointing in, to those perhaps as far as common threads when you look at Poirier's past. But something that jumped out at me was that, you know, Connor, or mainly Michael Johnson too, were southpaws, right, as well.
Yeah.
Which can kind of offer a bit of a different dynamic. And maybe maybe I'm gonna get canceled here. Hopefully you guys see the spirit in this joke. Maybe they're comparing. I'm like, why are they comparing Michael Johnson? I'm like, is it because both Michael Johnson and Michael Chandler are black guys? Like, what's going on? Like, they're.
I saw where you were going with that one.
Sorry, you already knew. You can see my shit-eating grin. You can head me off. You can head me off at the pass like a footwork drill. You're just like, okay, I know which way this fucker's going. Sorry, folks. No.
If this is Black History Month, no way Chandler loses.
No way. Obviously, just hilarious because like Chandler always reminds me of like Bradley Cooper's character from Wedding Crashers. Like wait, you're gonna kill pheasants? Like they're endangering the indigenous population. All right. Like he is really violent about something that's supposed to be very peaceful. Like he just really seems like that Bradley Sack from Wedding Crashers. Oh, yeah. Crab cakes in football. That's what Maryland does, baby. In between rounds, he's just getting like ridiculously pumped. I obviously have trading history with Michael Chandler. So it was funny. Part of me, I picked Poirier, and if anything, I've got a bit of a bias toward Chandler. But I was getting really excited to the point of, sorry if I was getting obnoxious, but my analysis and bets have been so bad. I've just been so happy when I see stuff that I talk about happen. And my pick was basically like, Chandler's going to try to wrestle from what we said, right? But I just think that the check right hook is too potent,
Yeah.
Something I didn't say in my last podcast, which I was going to bring up to you. You do a good job in your Patreon showing that how he was actually building in that Benson Henderson fight. But I also guess, and I guess it doesn't matter, but like why I got so shaky and my memory was shaken was that I didn't remember Henderson having as much success as he did before he got set up and knocked out, right?
I felt the same way.
Okay.
More in the first fight than the second, but in both.
Yes.
I remembered that being kind of a clear win for Chandler, and going back, I thought it might have been a draw, actually.
Yeah, and even his reaction, like, he's going nuts because that's Chandler, but it was almost like he was, like, surprised, like, oh my God, did I just do that? Like, because he took some shots in there, I think, it's hard because Benson Henderson, both, obviously he no-sell shots that go his way, but his shots kind of have a weird no-sell effect. Like, whether he's winning and, like, wow, he's beating Brandon Thatch and we didn't expect that or whatever. Like, his shots always seem at the same speed. It's always, like, a never higher than a 6 of 10. Like, it's just
an incredible ability to suck any of the, like, I don't know, like, dynamism out of a fight.
Yeah. Like, he's muting it so it's not registering much with the judges against him, which is good. But he's not exactly, like, putting a lot out there. Yeah, but when you actually go back and look, you're like, oh, wow, he was actually doing pretty good there.
Yeah.
And again, not an atrocious thing. Again, I didn't bet. If anything was, part of me was hoping I was wrong. But, you could have argued that, maybe the check right hook stoppage did happen in round 1, right? But, I know Chandler goes back and wins round 2, and that's always the argument for these things, right? Whenever, even when there's a really bad, like, atrocious fight where it should have been stopped, they're always like, yeah, but Brian Ortega may have landed, like, 2 punches on Volkanovski in round 5. Like, he was stopped 3 times in round 3. I don't care what happened in round 5, like, so I hate that argument, but, like, so I'm not trying to, like, die on a hill here, but, it was
definitely
pretty brutal.
Did seem like if it went a couple seconds longer, that was imminent. Chandler gets into a lot of those situations too, though. He'll end a round with his arms just hanging at his hips, looking like he can't possibly go on, and then in the next round he'll just knock the guy down.
Yep. By the way, Dan Albert in the chat. Dan Albert and Hacks. I already put Hacks on the screen, by the way. What up, Hacks? Dan Albert says, anyways, congratulations to Alex Pajeda for defeating Hentai. which is
we don't have to listen to a middleweight champion talking about his dog's genitals.
Which is great, yep. Yeah, I know. Oh my gosh. I love Dan. I got my favorite analysts in here. Hacks brought something up here while we were talking about Chandler. Hacksarai says, Chandler relies on the absolute threat of his offense to stop you swinging back, to which Dustin eats it, licks his lips, and thinks, damn, can't guillotine that. Guess I have to throw back instead. That is, yep, yeah, that is Chandler's MO, and you really felt that when he started spamming body kicks. Speaking of Benson Henderson, he thought he was Benson Henderson in the Anthony Pettis rematch, right? Or Anthony Pettis, I should say, in the Benson Henderson rematch, when it was Anthony Pettis spams the open side body kicks on the southpaw. And I was like, oh, wow, he's going Anthony Pettis on him.
That was a good moment. Those were working.
Yeah.
He kept those up, too, and Poirier adjusted, extended the distance a little bit and started parrying them. And Chandler wasn't really able to adjust himself and start connecting them to his punches. I feel like there was, like, maybe he had so much success early because he was getting in really easily and landing his right hand that he kind of... Chandler often does that anyway, but I feel like he was neglecting his setups a little bit more in this fight because he had quite a bit of success just kind of running in and hitting Poirier at the beginning. So he didn't really worry too much about, like, punching off of his kicks or combining those, and instead just kind of tried to storm him. And it worked well early. He was getting to him consistently. He was backing Poirier up. Poirier wasn't landing too many counters consistently in the first couple minutes. And then he got hurt when he was swarming, and stuff kind of snowballed from there. Poirier started landing those little offbeat counters more and just picking at him, and the exchanges got messier. Chandler didn't have the speed and explosion that he did before, and was kind of slowly dragged into Poirier's fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And the scrambles were kind of apparent to the way it was going. Obviously, Chandler has a strong round two, right? Is able to get a lot of control, and we've seen that just
Yeah.
as recently as Poirier's last fight in round two with Oliveira. And I don't know if it's Chandler doesn't get enough credit for his back take ability and or his ground and pound. And I say that because that's mainly like if it's shade at anybody, it's shade to Chandler himself because like it's just like why don't you do that more? Like going back to Eddie Alvarez 2 or whatever, it was like he made that fight way harder. He wanted to face block to win it so badly when he could have just ground and pounded and did the Tim Bosch to Matt Hamill or Matt Hamill to Tim Bosch move around the neck, the R choke as Rogan used to call it back in the day. But like but I don't know if that's iterations to where like he doesn't work with our shared coach Neil Melanson, so coincidentally we don't see as much of that, even though he tried to dust it out for this fight. Or when we shared the same boxing coach, Gil Martinez, who was the guy to teach me to roll under my crosses. Like you saw Chandler do that in order to get to that first Eddie Alvarez fight, beating Patricky and Eddie the first time. And again, like I just said, by the time he fights Eddie the second time, he's with a different coach. He's in San Diego, and he's just face blocking stuff. He's not rolling under anything, which is why I picked Gaethje to knock him out with a hook, a left hook, obviously, for Gaethje. And which didn't happen. Gaethje obviously found the uppercuts for the dips, which was great adjustment. But it was what was being called for on this one for me. And then after seeing, like I shared with you, Ryan, seeing Tony Ferguson light him up when I went back to rewatch that, I was like, ooh, I think I rewatched that ahead of the Nate fight for Tony, and I just page marked it. I'm going to page note this for Chandler's fight with Poirier because that's not good if this is what he's doing against southpaws right now or getting hit with.
Yeah, Tony was nailing him on exits. He was making it difficult with his light lead hand and stuff like that for Chandler to get in on his own offense. And when he hurt him, when he swarmed against the fence, Chandler, again, didn't really have much of a response for that besides punching back. And against a guy like Dustin, that's not the response you want.
Yep. Haxerai says, Izzy's knowledge of all things weeb is more surface level than your joke about pulp culture knowledge, Dan. That makes me feel a little better. All right. Let me see. All right, I'm gonna keep pushing down here. Thank you guys for in the chat. I'm gonna laugh too hard at Dan Albert and Haxerai's comments if I'm not careful. But the next fight was speaking of Phil McKenzie, we brought up the Glue Factory, right? This is the annual trip to the Glue Factory, which I know, like someone was saying, my guy, shout out to True UK fan, like for us who've been watching sport forever, the last 10 years have been brutal, right? You had like 5 years of BJ Penn like putting us through just what he put us through inside of the octagon, not even getting into the lava shack shit. But like, but like 2022 in particular, like I was talking about this, like just recently we had like, Glover lost, Dubronx lost, as far as like the Brazilians, the Brazilian vets that are, they're used to plop other people in North American promotions. They fly them into, ACA or ACAB there, Ryan. They're always getting the short end of the stick. So I love seeing that, but they got knocked down. Anderson Silva gets, beat by Privileged Paul. We had Andrei Arlovsky getting submitted by the guy who literally is known for dubbing, like jumping into submissions any chance he got. Like, that is the guy that is now submitting Andrei Arlovsky, Marcos Rogerio de Lima. Like, it's been a pretty sad run.
Great time for vets.
Yeah, man. It's been, Glue Factory's kicking butt. Phil McKenzie's profiting over there across the pond. But, yeah, it's been rough, man. Did you expect this, I'm sure, to some extent?
If we're talking about Frankie Edgar, that's been a long, slow conveyor belt. It's taken It's been heading there for a while. I'm not super familiar with Chris Gutierrez, but yeah, I wasn't expecting Frankie Edgar to beat someone who has won a lot in the UFC at this point, to be honest. It's sad to see, and the thing that makes me the most sad about this fight is that just before it happened, when they were doing the introductions, Bruce Buffer announced this specifically as Frankie Edgar's last fight. And I don't know if I've ever seen a sure sign that it's not going to be his final fight.
And but by the way, that felt really off. Like Bruce, you can kind of forget about Bruce being Bruce because it's just like Goldberg, where it turns into the Charlie Brown thing after a while. You just like wah 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 wah. You just zone it out, right? But like that completely was a different cadence, right? Like I know everybody now because Bruce does his like cameos and like pays for things. So like you hear like you just hear his voice like I'm surprised he doesn't sell his own thyme like thyme like THYME like it's thyme like he seems like a guy who markets everything, you know, and like and he really took liberty there, you know. He really went into like Bruce marketing mode, like you know, like when DC and Rogan go into podcast mode. Like I was worried Bruce was gonna keep like ad libbing and go, and if you'd like a cameo, like stop, Bruce, no, just get on with it, please.
Bro, we're all watching this through finger glasses. What are you doing?
Stop it! Don't make us more aware of and draw it out more. I actually picked Edgar here and even took a shot on him. At the odds, I just thought that maybe he could get, do what
Edgar took a hell of a shot himself.
He did. Oh, he did. Yeah, that was the thing. It was either going to be a knee or a kick from the left side, right? Or a knee that was meant as a kick, or one of those combinations. That's what it was always going to be, wasn't it?
It's been 3 straight knee, front kick, and Sandhagen's flying knee.
It was the uppercut. Like, that's what I used to do when I was breaking down Frankie fights. I'd look at the other guy's uppercut. Like, that was always the first thing. But everybody figured out the front kick and the knees and
the
the
lightweights knew
tools.
that, like, he would duck onto upward arcing strikes, but for some reason they never thought of kneeing him. If only they'd known all this time.
Yeah, and even the front kick seems like something Benson Henderson would want to do, you know? That would be a weird strike for him. Like, why would you do that? I mean, and don't get me wrong, he still edged it out or whatever, but, like, yeah, it was always, like, wacky circular or the uppercuts for the smart ones. But yeah, that was rough to see. And apparently it was rough scenes with his kids front row.
Oh,
and
no.
John Anik said he's traumatized for them because they're probably going to be forever traumatized with what they saw. And there was just some other kid recently that this happened, I forget, another Glue Factory fight, and like the kid was crying and they had to like bring him in the back like crying like hysterically. I'm like, oh God, that's great.
I'll never forget the photo of Mark Coleman after Fedor beat him up in Pride, the picture of him hugging his crying girls with that huge hematoma on his head.
That one, yep. Daddy's okay, and that's when that was like when Mark Coleman like didn't show any of his soft side at that point, you know?
Yeah.
Like so there wasn't I don't even think like the even maybe unless maybe Smashing Machine was out, you know, maybe that, but like that would be the only glimpse. Like so to see a hard man like that, like oh man, and then I got scared. It didn't happen. I think it was like Jason Gonzalez or one of these things. It was Jim Miller. It was like one of the fights back in Florida where it was still empty pandemic because he was like in the prelims. And the camera goes and it's like his family and all of his kids there front row. And there's like, no one around him, which makes it even creepier and more like vulnerable. And I'm just like, Jim, not because I love you. You're my favorite, and I bet on you. But just please don't lose right now. This is because you just saw the perfect setup. Like you just saw the MMA gods do that meme of the black dude in the yellow suit peeking behind the tree. Like, ooh, I know what time it is.
Whoa, black dude in the yellow suit. That's Bunk.
Bunk from The Wire. Yeah, exactly. Bunk from The Wire. How dare me of a wire-centric podcast here. I always use the Wire gifs. But yeah, we know that's how the MMA gods be, right? Like anytime there's a chance to like,
oh yeah,
you know, they're like oh wait, paraplegic parade. Here's a banana peel because like that is the MMA gods. Like they are terrible. I'm sorry, they're awful, right? We know this. I'm not.
It truly is a Murphy's Law sport.
It is. It is very bad. It is very bad. All right, we're gonna push through the rest here because and any last thoughts on that before we push through? Push the rest.
Yeah, nothing about the fight itself, but I hope this is the end for Edgar. There's nothing left to prove and probably nothing left to give at this point, and he's had just an incredible career. Very few fighters have been as influential as him, both in the cage and out. One of the greatest careers of all time, and it's just incredible he was able to accomplish. Always sad to see a legend go out like that, but it is always nice to see them go out.
Yeah, it is, and it's but man, these interviews are killer. The last thing I'll say about this is like I don't know what was worse, where it's like you're interviewing the knocked out fighter and he's having a breakdown.
Oh God, yeah.
And Rogan like cuts him off.
Like, do you want to talk? Like, fuck, man. And then what are you doing?
And then part of me is like, if you argue interview him, don't rudely cut him off because I felt like I know he was about to probably break down there, granted, but it just felt like a really abrupt cutoff. And then you got like Gutierrez over there, which, by the way, shout out to Mark Montoya. What an awesome coach to be doing that through cancer. Wishing him and his family nothing but the best. And Gutierrez, I know he's got his own family struggle, so nothing but love. Wishing these people the best. But it's just so funny that we're gonna get to the point, Ryan, where it's just like, they're having a breakdown, where they're crying, they're like this. This person's dying. This person's got cancer. This is this person's last fight. This person's still unconscious on the canvas. But I just want to say shout out to Skinny Best because he'll get you paid. Like, there's just so much going on in these post fights now. Like, I can't take it. Like, I can't take it. Like, this is too much.
Shout out to that one time Anik was like, both these guys dealing with custody battles, by the way.
Oh yeah, it was a Gutierrez fight. That was great. That was up there with
that was him too.
She was still actively breastfeeding this camp, and that awkward silence, like, oh jeez, no. By the way, and I wanted to shout this out like 20 podcasts ago, but I forget which fight it was. It was you probably know this fight because it's the Brad Riddell and Brad Riddell versus Rafael Fiziev. And they're laying out like in the first round. They're like, laying out like, and when Riddell stopped coaching at Tiger Muay Thai, it was Fiziev who took the job. And it was like they're doing that basic layout, and then Bisping just goes into like like fighter, like back with his dick out days, just he goes in and go, hey, got the leftovers, huh? And we're like, we're talking about a coaching job here, Bisping. We're not talking about conquest of women or whatever the fuck is going on in your head right now while we're watching this
sloppy
fight.
Coaching seconds.
He just has the guy. He's got his he's got his dick out at the bar. Like, you're calling a fight right now, Bisping. Like, it was just this awkward silence. If anybody goes back to watch that fight, please tell me you've giggled at that. It's hilarious because you could just see the other commentator's face going like, all right, that's left field. All right, we're going there. I mean, there's a coaching job. I don't know if they put their penis in the same place, but okay.
I mean, coaching job. I'm sure there's
a
lot of that going around.
Oh, jeez, you know what?
You know what I'm talking about.
As soon as I said it, I knew. Dan Hooker defeated Claudio Puelles, a.k.a. Mexican guy that Feño likes, right, Ryan, as you put it? Or shout out to my guy Feño, by the way.
Is that the one?
No, it was Gutierrez. It was Gutierrez.
It was probably Puelles. So.
It's just he was just a guy who was not Mexican, so I was looking to make that ignorant joke where Ryan opened the door, blame him, and I love Feño, by the way. Him and Dan Albert. That's why I miss Dan Albert doing his preview shows, because him and Feño still did a solo one on the Fight Side podcast. Another reason why you guys can subscribe to their free feed. You're still going to get all that goodies there. But shout out to Feño. So this is where I'll be kind of cruel, though, man, because sometimes you just like, you're like, isn't my bias, because we all have our biases, right, Ryan? I know you have your biases for fighters you like and fighters you dislike. And I'm like, is Puelles a guy that I just dislike and I can't get over it? Like, I just don't like his style because he's not even super athletic, but he's an opportunist. And my bias, if I'm being honest, everybody knows I call myself out all the time. I love old phrasing. I love old dudes. Wow. I love old veterans. Wow. Easy, Dan. Even there. Old veterans, veteran southpaws, obviously. No. Old veterans and like process-based fighters, regardless of your age, over the athletic opportunists or the hyped product. And at least within the MMA gambling circle, Ryan, there's these guys that they just get around and like to hype, and usually it's because they're young, athletic, and have been lucky enough to like get Glue Factory-esque matchmaking. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Absolutely.
And it kind of makes from odds
Is
to
Puelles one of the guys that the gamblers like? That would surprise me.
Yeah, and not even just in general. And I've been burned, and that's what I always hate. Where it's just like, again, it's just like, what are you gonna say? You saying Puelles didn't deserve his win over Felipe Silva? He earned it. He got his ass beat for 3 rounds. It's weird how you say it. It's like, I don't want to say he doesn't deserve the win, but like, you know exactly what I mean, Ryan, and other analysts out there.
He went in there knowing exactly what he needed to do, and that was get the shit kicked out of him for 10 minutes, and then pull some knee bar off the bottom.
You hate to see bad approaches rewarded, I think, is a better way to word what I'm trying to say, right?
I get exactly what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely true that we all have our biases and that favoring a process-based approach makes a lot of logical sense, but you're also going to be wrong sometimes when somebody just dynamisms their way into winning a fight. but I'm going to tell you something that will
Mhm.
serve you well for your MMA pundit career.
All
It
right.
is always okay to discriminate against people whose primary method of victory is leg locks. It just always is. It's okay to make fun of them. It's okay to be biased against them. You are right. They are wrong.
You know what? Especially when we can get like, as close as I'm gonna get. It's not as good, Ryan. It's not as good, but as close as I'm gonna get to reliving Alan Belcher and Husamar Palhares again, right? I mean, like he went
If
into
you're an
the.
insane athletic freak that just does nothing but heel hook people, ingest acai all day and everything, that's fine. Those guys are great. I love them. Claudio Puelles is not that.
Oh my goodness, that is great. Oh my god, yeah, no, he is not that at all. And yeah, and that was the thing with me. So like, I got burned. I think I tried to fade him against Hoggle from Labyrinth, aka Chris Gritzmacher. He's gonna kick my ass. He's like, oh Hoggle, huh, bitch? Like I'm just saying, if I needed help getting past David Bowie, I'd call you, bro. Um, Especially with David Bowie with that camel toe that left nothing to the imagination. I mean, a young Dan Tom was traumatized. Anyways, neither here nor there. By the way, speaking of that, shout out to the MMA analysis. They break down fights. Ryan, that there's this podcast. They break down fights and they heavily do it through hog analysis.
Oh, lovely. We appreciate some good hog analysis over here. Did they ever have anything to say about Will Campazano?
Will
Who's a
Campazano?
notorious boner guy.
Oh my god, I gotta go dig back to the junkie weigh-in photo forums for some Will Campazano. But yeah, that's actually ringing some bells there. But yeah, Hooker was Puelles was a guy that I've been on the wrong side of, so I was kind of nervous. I had like PTSD because it's like, is it something I'm missing? Is it my bias here? Should I just take a clue? But to your point, where you go, bettors like this guy. Well, I think Dan Hooker opened at a minus 200 favorite, which he looked like a minus 400.
That's surprising,
right?
Yeah.
Even that's surprising. He got bet down, which is a lot for these, not as popular fights and for MMA, but like 60 cents or so. So he got bet down to like minus 140. I got him at minus 139.
Wow.
So
That's
that
astonishing. Maybe it was more. Was it more of like a Hooker might be shot thing?
Again, there is this dynamic which makes me go the other way even more, right? Because I'm such a freaking contrarian, Ryan. Where everybody, and it's not everybody, by the way. There's plenty of people that were on Hooker this week. A lot of MMA gamblers were, and shouts to you guys. So I'm not talking in generalities. Don't get hurt or mad at me. You guys know I got love for you. But there is this thing that many of you guys MMA gamblers, you all know, whether you're guilty on it or not. It's something that exists where they love fade. They hate old people. Like I'm trying to think of who hates old people the most, but like just MMA gamblers will hate them more. I guarantee you. Think of whatever you want, Ryan. And they salivate, especially when it's like somebody who's like does flashy things like spinny kicks or like leg locks or something like sexy. They're just like whoa. It's that I call it the jingle jangle effect. The reason why those toys are effective throughout time, right? As technology grows, why the jingle jangle gets the baby is because that's what gets all of us back to our body work and headshot conversation we just had, right? At the top of the show, right, Ryan? It's
for sure.
That's human nature. It's not. I'm not trying to like call everybody out. I'm just as susceptible to every one of you to it. It's because it's human nature, and I think that's what that comes down to. But yeah, I'm glad I pulled the trigger. I played Hooker by sub because I thought he was going to left hook him and then guillotine him, which almost did happen. He had
it did. It was close.
But he smartly wasn't trying to like sell out for that or anything. Obviously, was trying to keep it standing and make Puelles stand back up. And as Anthony Smith put it, he said, Anthony Smith said in the post-fight show, I try to call a ball, and that might be the most worstly ill-prepared fighter I've ever seen on the stage fight. So
yeah, he
can't call me a hater when a fighter's saying that. So
he thought his own path to victory was diving for leg locks, and like it's one thing if you have an actual process behind setting them up. Even then, it's not good. Like you're not going to be consistently elite or beat upper mid-level fighters using leg locks. But somebody like Ryan Hall, he'll set them up with his kicks. He'll do all that like leg kicks into shifting to set up his Minari rolls and everything like that. Puelles didn't have. I don't know how he thought he was going to win this fight.
Yeah, it's bad, especially when Hooker already showed, in his first fight against Ian Entwistle, where he TKO'd a guy trying to leg lock him. That was his game,
yeah.
Right?
And Whistle, it was like, I remember that. He took he was just beating on him for like 2 minutes or something, and Entwistle just wouldn't give up the leg lock.
Because he had
like,
the inside heel hook
position.
Disengaged. He thought he had it, and he's like, no. He
Hooker
just
wasn't
elbowed
like
him.
keeping him there or anything.
Well, because
He just like
he's long and he does one of my favorite things. Now, it almost got him into trouble here. Ryan on the commentary was going, "Oh no," but I personally love it. I don't know about you guys or anybody in the chat. I apologize. I haven't been able to get to it as much as I like, and there's some really good stuff in the chat right now with my guy Hacks and Dan Albert and Ghost Phantom in there, who has some good questions as always as well. Some new names as well. But I like when people pressure in, because that's what I do. I stack in and try to turn it into a back take where you feed the leg too deep for them to get proper crank leverage. And a lot of the times it forces a scramble. And essentially what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to grab up by behind their head, or depending if they're like kind of belly down knee barring, I'm kind of grabbing here around their shoulder and neck area, and I'm trying to leverage myself up to them to use.
And he did that, came in and like got the underhook in the head and arm.
Yep, use it to get top position, use it to pressure and kind of smash your way out, which he was eventually, he was able to smash his leg out. And just in general, a lot of these, like from Guida, it was started from a half guard transition, right? Because there's a lot of half guard sweeps, like Wellington Turman was going for some deep half stuff earlier in the night and whatnot. And a lot of times to kill that momentum, it sounds really brutish, but again, grapplers and Ryan, you can weigh in. But a lot of times what I'll do is I'll reach out and I'll grab their head like this, you know. It'll be opposite because I'm reaching like that, but it essentially looks like I'm just kind of slapping their head. Because once they're under you, whether they're going for trying to finish a triangle or more of a debasing sweep, which is probably going to be a 50-50 type, one leg in, one leg out, half guard, deep half variation where they're getting under you and debasing you, to kill that momentum, it's hard once they're kind of already under you, but their head, the top of from their hips to their head is going to have to swing a certain way to finish their momentum on whatever tack or sweep they're attempting. So if you simply brutishly, even just grappling without strikes, you can just slap them in the face, kind of, and just not slap them, but like hold a post there, like slap and like hold, and they will essentially, you know, it'll stop their momentum. It'll kill that momentum of you getting swept. So it's the same principle here as far as leveraging toward their head or neck area to kill that momentum for the leg lock, if that made any sense.
Absolutely. Damian Maia's whole thing on top while he was passing, like his legs would do the passing work and his arms would just be there to post, just to block you from moving. He moves his legs one way and you go to adjust and you try to swing your hips and his arm is just there, so I can't move my head. And like you said, if you pressuring into them, especially in MMA, not only does it leave you in a better position, it kills their posture and prevents them from like getting the space and leverage they need to make an attack. But especially in MMA, you can use that position for ground and pound. Whereas if you go the other way and try to back out and create space, you're letting them attack your legs. You're giving them space to take your back, and that's probably the best use for leg locks in MMA. Isn't to finish the leg lock; it's as a sweep to stand up, to get guys turning their backs or turning away, so you can come up on a single leg or come up to the back or just get off the bottom. And pushing in like Hooker did avoids that.
Yep, absolutely. This matchup, we might have probably be one to have a decent amount to say, but then we can push the rest really fast, speed chess. But Hanato Moicano defeated Brad Riddell. My initial thing on the podcast, I was like, I'm leaning toward Moicano. I haven't got to this. It feels like a close fight, though. I probably wouldn't bet anything unless it's submission for Moicano. And I was like, maybe it's because I was one of the few who called the submission for Jalen Turner over Riddell, because he can't help himself but shoot and give his neck or back. When you turtle, you don't just give your back, you also give your neck for front headlock chokes. For the Turner example, I was like, I don't want to go to the well, where it's like, the read is too good to be true. MMA is not consistent, right? There's no such thing as consistent reads. So I ended up steering away after watching some tape. Like I talked maybe because Moicano wants money and Moicano fucks or whatever, like his whatever. We need a Moicano fuck shirt, by the way. That's all I hear in these post-fight interviews.
Did he say that? I barely heard anything, but I could definitely see that.
He's Moicano wants money, and he just has all this like, crazy, like, Joe Rogan, you the best. I listen to you every day. You the smartest. And I'm like, okay, here we go. And like maybe I got swayed because I was like looking at Brad Riddell, and he's like self introspection, fighting depression, mental health, being a good dude. And again, back to your biases, I'm like, maybe Brad Riddell can win. Maybe
needs money, big stakes.
Maybe he can win. Yep, exactly, baby. Big stakes and big beers, which I am not hating Moicano, by the way. Not hating.
I respect that.
But yeah, Brad Riddell may be too nice. But does it blow you away that Moicano older than Brad Riddell? By 2 or 3 years?
I think the only reason that's particularly surprising is the hairline.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Brad Riddell's got an unkind hairline, and he definitely was built to fight, though. I mean, he's got just that, like, he looks like my, like, one of the old wrestling coaches in high school where they have, like, that, just that, like, forehead where they look like they're built to take shots. Like,
You
it's
look at
like,
his forehead and you can tell he probably has cauliflower ear.
yeah, exactly. I don't want to get, I'm going to stop there before I get into, like, phrenology territory or anything
Ragging
like
on this
that.
dude for no
We are
reason.
not getting. And I am,
Sorry, Brad, we love you.
I know, and I'm a Brad Riddell fan. Like I used to like joking, and this is probably why I get a lot of shit. Like I used to like jokingly kind of and I like Izzy, I like Dan Hooker, I like City Kickboxing, but I used to be like Brad Riddell, clearly the best City Kickboxer fighter. And he's according to his profile, he's a Bang Town Muay Thai guy now. But yeah, this was tough. I'll just throw it to you because you can explain it much better to me. What's happened with Brad Riddell? It seemed like he was trying to navigate, which was a hard style at countering back foot style, never easy, as it never was, even when he won. But what are we seeing, and what can we expect from Riddell? You think, Ryan?
Moicano looked really good here. It did a lot of things to dissuade like Riddell's primary offense. Within like 45 seconds or so of the fight starting, he hit him with a pretty clean lead knee, which was really nice because a lot of Riddell's offense, especially against taller, longer guys, comes off the level change with body shots. And right away, Moicano kind of shut that down. His jab was
Yeah.
also really nice to bait out Riddell's counters and punish them. But with Riddell particularly, I haven't watched a ton of his kickboxing matches, but from what I remember, he was kind of not necessarily a standard Dutch kickboxer where they would like stand in the pocket with a high guard. I'm doing that. I'm holding my hands in front of my head now, like a
Right.
Dutch kickboxer. You can't see that. But he was always kind of his defensive system was a little bit different, but his offense was kind of similar to that. He was an exchange heavy guy. He would look to stand in front of you, use like throwaways to draw up your guard, and then pound you around the guard. Good at setting up his offense, but not super deep in terms of boxing skill. Uh, and a lot of the things that he didn't need in kickboxing are coming back to hurt him in MMA. He, to my eye, he doesn't really have skills to control when and where exchanges happen. He's very good in exchanges, but he kind of lets the opponent set the tone for how they're going to happen. Um, with a lot of the other city kickboxing guys, Adesanya and Volkanovski, they want exchanges to happen on their terms, especially Volkanovski. He's amazing at angling off to enter his own exchanges, so he's not creating 50-50 exchanges. He's creating 70-30 exchanges where he's in better position to hit you than you are him.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you try to do that, if you try to like take an outside angle to shorten the path of your right hand, he'll kick you in the leg and circle out, just deny the opportunity to have that exchange, and then go back and set his own preferable exchange up. Riddell just kind of accepts them. He doesn't tend to enter on angles like that. He's not good at nullifying opponents' exchanges. Rather, he'll just accept them for the most part. In the Dover fight, they were both constantly colliding and forcing exchanges, and whenever one of them wanted to exchange, the other guy would oblige. His ring craft is an issue as well. He finds himself backing up to the cage a lot,
Yeah.
and he's not very active in either circling out before he gets to the cage or employing tactics to get himself off the cage, like changing direction or feinting to get a guy leaning over a hip and then pivoting out. So he's almost too game. Like he's down to fight and exchange whenever that takes place, and he's very good in the exchanges. But when he's fighting guys like Moicano, who are really long and have an excellent jab, and will bait out that offense, trick him into thinking they're about to bang, and then pull away from his offense and land something else, he kind of lacks the skill set to respond super effectively to that, I think.
Yeah, and I always want to be careful about like projecting on someone to say, "Oh, you just need a clinch or a clutch mechanism," right? Because it's so easy to prescribe from the outside, and kind of like with Alex Pereira, like I was trying to remind people, like, I'm not a specialist on kickboxing or him, but I really did a deep dive as best I could. And one of the things I said was that like it wasn't a mainstay of his game, and particularly with Izzy, Izzy was usually out framing or out positioning him in like majority of their very brief tie-ups, which are limited rules, depending on where they're fighting and so on and so forth. And with Riddell's kickboxing, I didn't see a lot of clinch stuff when I would go back to watch it. Again, I didn't do that deep of a dive. So again, I don't want to like all of a sudden just tell someone who's an out fighter to be like, you gotta just pressure, or like just go completely
Yeah.
against your instinct, right? Because you can't just prescribe all. But I do feel like if you are going to be some kind of a counter or stymie, or like you do need that. And again, Leon Edwards has a lot of other attributes to facilitate this, as well as like biological things like his frame, right? Like, but like more clinch savvy, stymieing and stalling, as far as that goes, which he does have, but he's just so eager to both shoot and give away those positions, those turtle and TP positions when he's like scrambling. It's just makes him potent for these style of submission threats.
Yeah, and in this fight, Moicano was really good at doing the punching clutch thing too.
Mm-hmm.
Riddell would try to attack, and they would come together, and Moicano would immediately try to capitalize with underhooks. To be fair to Riddell, though, I think he's had some tough matchups recently, and I think his
Sure.
style kind of translates to MMA a little bit better than his recent run has shown. Like, he got Moicano, Jalen Turner, and Fiziev, like three of the worst
Yeah.
people you could possibly get for like a pocket boxer who doesn't have the nullifying skill set and relies a lot on level changes. Like, really brutal matchups for that kind of style. And I think that if he got some more maybe like pressure fighters, or guys who aren't like really long and very good at attacking level changes, or even just grapplers, because he's quite a good anti-wrestler, I think, then he could maybe shine. But yeah, he's had a rough run recently.
Yeah, he has. Hopefully they match him up kindly. I'm sure Moicano will be matched up kindly in a way that benefits everybody. Except for the actual pay, of course. But neither here nor there, I guess. But as far as like stylistically, I'm sure they'll take good care of him. Before we knock out the rest of this card, James Kendrick says, "Crazy idea here. Let's have Whaley give Carla the rematch. Good, bad, terrible idea." I think Kyle Mack would say that's a great idea.
He can use Carla as a warm-up for her next defense.
Jesus, poor Carla. She's just like, oh my gosh, just like. I just picture her like that cricket character, and It's Always Sunny from Philadelphia when they do the pro wrestling episode. Like they just gets screwed up by the trash man and Danny DeVito. Yeah. Anyways, Ryan Spann defeated Dominic Reyes. Oh boy, man! Again, how the mighty have fallen. Again, Glover's Garage. This was a not good match for them. And
former light heavyweight champ.
Yeah, former light heavyweight champ beat John Jones. Dominic Reyes. That's crazy, man. It just went in, it was talking about his defense, and then just went in, and I don't know if he punched to kick in clear punching range, and just ate a straight shot, ran right onto it. And thoughts on this one?
I didn't see the fight. I just saw the clip of the knockout on Twitter, and yeah, man, it's been a rough run for Reyes. I think he left his gym after the Jones fight, and that's where stuff seemed to go downhill from him.
Yeah.
In hindsight, we didn't really have a lot of data on him coming up. Like, he only really had a couple fights against good competition.
Mm-hmm.
And what I remember of him from watching his fights before the Jones fight is that he kind of had a narrow, effective skill set.
Mm-hmm.
He would throw kicks on the outside, and they were all right, but they weren't really deep, and there's something that most solid strikers should be able to adjust to. And he was good at like angling out and landing the rear hand counter. But he doesn't really do a lot to enforce his game or to like create the situations that most lend themselves to his best work. He's not really drawing out the kind of offense he likes to counter. His footwork patterns don't really encourage guys to throw in ways that he wants to counter. And in this fight, or at least in the clip of the knockout, it seemed like he was trying to do more work on the lead than he usually does. Like, he's usually pretty reserved on the lead. He'll mostly circle off to the open side and let guys come to him. Or when he does, he'll kind of like jab in with a non-committal jab and set up his offense. Here, he just kind of darted in, and Spann caught him. He timed it well. I guess the main thing I think with Reyes is that he has a problem kind of making his game coherent. That I'm not really sure he has a great consistent way to get to his most effective offense, and either guys have kind of worked that out, or he's gotten more predictable, but something bad is going on.
Yeah, definitely. It's almost like the analogy for me is like he's packing for a trip, but he's essentially packing the same kind of tools.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to stop for directions. He doesn't want to double back if he forgot something. And according to him, the freeway is the only way to get there because he just doesn't slow down. Like, I mean, not even just in a literal sense, but like mentally, right? Like, you know, there's not that. Like it's like there's a constant urgency. Like I have to do this until the wheels fall off. Whether it's, you know, against OSP where he's just repeating the same things, and he was lucky enough to kind of have like an Arnold Allen Yatsen Meza where he gets it's the decision, but it's kind of a third round knockout when you watch the fight, you know.
Yeah.
But I wonder if that almost did a detriment because that kind of like, you know, tells him like, no, all you got to do is keep doing it, and it'll eventually be there. Mm-hmm. And so what you see from Blachowicz, Prochazka, and even in this fight, the general sense that I got from watching it was that he just answers the call. There's no sign of stopping. There's no sign of listening to the corner, working on any of tactics. And maybe, to his camp's credit, maybe they were working on, right? He was actually working with a bit of a camp this time, Glover's Garage, baby. But, you know, he just, again, he's on the freeway, and he's like, I get what you're saying, but I've already started my trip, and I can't stop. I'm sorry. I'll see you guys at the end of this. Like, it feels like it's that sure. Every time.
Hackstrise in the chat just brought up, I feel like before the team change, he was benefiting a lot from slowly adding small things to his game, but not losing them. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like, as he was coming up, he was building a little bit on that skill set, but he kind of lost that, and the development kind of took a nosedive seemingly around the time he left the camp.
Yeah, especially ground stuff too, which would make sense maybe, I guess, because one of his main camp stays was Joe Stevenson, and that's his specialty was grappling. Because you actually saw some grappling in his regional scene, like he knew how to play guys around the turtle and not get overly excited. And obviously the Yuri Prochazka fight, but like you saw, like he would be gifted some of those positions that he did show he knew what to do with in the amateurs. And just too excited, too fast. Again, we're on the freeway, so I can't slow down. I can't look back there what I used to do. It's now. And he just kind of has that Hackstrise. But since that, he's had no consistent forward development as a fighter. So all the flaws are so obvious. It does seem like that now, doesn't it? Does it not? I wish him nothing but the best, obviously, but that is definitely rough. Good for Ryan Spann, who apparently said he never did a training camp before. I don't know what he's been doing this whole time. Then. Yeah, that's a quote that I saw floating around.
Is it because he's training all year round, or because he's not training?
I don't. It's like one of those things where it's like I never lifted weights in my life before, but now I'm lifting weights, and it's like, did you lifted weights before? You just did it wrong, and then you stayed away from it because you did it wrong. But let's not act like you found a way. You just like there's always that exaggeration, right? Like I've never done this before.
It'd be a light heavyweight thing. If there's one division where people just like go to the gym now and then and like mess around and then walk into a UFC fight, it would be light heavyweight.
It's a very Derek Lewis thing too. It sounds like Derek Lewis. You can just never take him seriously, but he's always
he's definitely sounds like he's bullshitting.
Oh yeah, I train by jerking off more and ordering a supersized meal. Like, God damn it, Derek! Like we can't take anything you say seriously.
I don't know how to wrestle, and he's like punching into like outside trips and stuff.
So I'm gonna get up. I love Derek Lewis. Shouts to the turtle, baby. Turn your back into a ski slope. That's how you get up. Aaron Blanchfield defeated Molly Mahan Bradley. You like the fucking accent? UFC. You know, again, I'm not. You know, again, I'm not downtrodden for the Barstool Army or anything like that. But I will say though, there is a fair criticism I saw. It's like, yo, she's getting all this popularity and traction, and you go throw her to like the worst matchup on the prelims of a big show. It just was a lot of ass thinking here. But Blanchfield rolls on. Any thoughts, Ryan?
At the very least, if they were going to set McCann up for getting run over like that, they should have done it on a card where they also set Paddy Pimblett up to get run over.
Oh my God.
But yeah, I'm not going to sit here, and I have too much respect to sit in front of you and pretend that I have any thoughts on Aaron Blanchfield.
Same here.
I'm not going to lie to you, Dan.
It's in one ear and out the other for me too. I know I got to pay attention because she's going to be a contender in this division, and I'll have to write her up eventually. That's another thing. What takes me so long to get some of these like the beginning of my week. So I was like, I wish I could just like either just do a research, a breeze through, and like tell you my opinion, bet it if I want to bet it, just get it out of the way. But like the fact that I have to like shoot a video, write up a profile, write up all this stuff, right? And the worst is like, here's what's gonna happen. Case in point, Aaron Blanchfield, or even like with guys like Arnold Allen, right? Like whatever men's popular division good fighters this even happens. They bury everybody on the prelims who they clearly have championship or at least contender trajectory, whether they're going to win or not, and they just bury them on the prelims. And then all of a sudden, I got a bunch of decisions, and I'm like, this person fought this many times, and they're all decisions? Oh, wow, that's what I'm doing for my whole weekend. And I'm like, do I have any of my previous notes I can crib and shortcut, like with other fighters? Nope, because the UFC has not done anything to give them a spotlight where I would even have to write about them on a main card.
Yeah, anyways, man, I gotta say, with the way the recent signings and matchmaking has been, doing weekly tape on that sounds brutal.
It is, man. It is. So shouts to everybody else in the grind. I am not the only one, but we all have our different processes.
Daniel and Dan on the fight site do that every week too. I have no idea how they do that.
And they got it out faster than I did, and so does everybody, of course. That's a low bar to clear. I shouldn't say that, but those guys did a really good job. Andre Petrosky with his Russian sickle tattoo. I don't know, Ryan. Forgive us Americans. We love, as much as we love hating communism, like the same white people who hate the communism are the first to get all the communist stuff tattooed on them or make it their things. I don't
born
get
in the U.S. He's born in Pennsylvania. He has a hammer and sickle tattoo.
Yeah, he was also apparently the first collegiate wrestling match in Madison Square Garden. DC was saying, not world wrestling match because DC beat him there, but yeah, he the first collegiate matches they had at the Garden. He actually was the first match that wrestled that day, so he actually could say that, which is pretty cool. And props to Petrosky, man. He's a monster. He's a guy that just goes through fatigue, which I appreciate, and it is pretty rare. He always looks like he's gassing, but he's always got third round finishes or close to. I picked Turman in this fight. Shout out to Feño. His analysis was spot on for this fight. I was incorrect. I just for me, it was just a big experience thing. Turman's way more experienced. Maybe the wrestling improved working with Glover, right? He's a Glover garage guy. Right. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I know that's so hard to even gauge as any kind of reliable metric, but for what it's worth, right? So that was kind of my angle. And the better striker, which he was, and was going to the body. Again, round 2 was pretty close. I scored it for Petrosky, even though I was biased and I was on the other side. I still scored it for Petrosky, but it was another one of those things but even more so, I would say, Ryan, than Pereira or Izzy rounds, where, Turman finished on his back, and even though they weren't clean elbows or ground and pound, it was really bad optics where he's gassed and he's just getting, walloped, even though they're not the cleanest shots kind of a deal.
Right.
But if you actually go back in the round, from the beginning to the middle, Turman was getting the better strikes on the feet and even hurt him and kind of got him to double over. But as we've seen with fights like Andre Uhl, Jonathan Martinez in Texas, you can get people literally doubling over in pain, and judges will still award the round to that person somehow because it was a body strike.
They
and
don't
who cares?
seem to see it at all.
It makes no sense. It makes no damn sense. But even me, bias, I'm not about ready to make that argument, which is why I didn't. So I'm definitely not dying on any hills. But again, body work, people, crazy how it gets reactions. But that actually made it more impressive to me that Petrosky pulled through. So props to Petrosky and anybody on him.
Body work pays off, but not on the scorecards.
Not on the scorecards. No, not on the scorecards, sadly. And that's just the truth. Even if there's good judges out there that agree with me, it's just kind of a sad reality, right? Matt Frivola defeated Otman Azatar, a dog I picked but I didn't play, and Steamroller comes through. You listen to the guy Matt Frivola talk. He reminds me of I forget, but one of many Michael Rappaport roles. He's a very honest, kind of hey, I was thinking maybe while I'm there at the UFC fight, I can get pictures with UFC fighters. And I'm not trying to be mean. Matt Frivola literally said this in an interview, and his coaches even were giving him shit, and they're like, Steamroller, you're a UFC fighter. You got to stop being a fan. You realize that some of them might actually want to see you. You know that, right? And he just seems like such an innocent and affable guy, which makes me love him more, of course. But I was happy to see him come through here. I don't know if you have any thoughts or even know any of these guys. Ottman was the potato bag, bringing the steroids. What's in the bag? Over in Abu Dhabi a couple years ago, guy. But yeah.
I think I've seen Ottman fight once or twice. He's the guy that just bites down on his mouthpiece and swings crazy overhands, right?
Yeah, and he's got the brother Abu, and they can literally do crazy stuff, allegedly maybe pour gasoline on their enemies, and their high-ranking government officials will get them out of trouble with the UFC, with local law. They get training with all the Khabib or anybody of Yeah. In the
Yikes,
net,
but not surprising.
in the yikes net of power, if that makes sense. They're all connected,
Yep.
right? Yeah, and he has amazing trading partners. Everybody like loves him and is afraid of this guy, and I was scared to pick against him because I'm just like I remember like his brother recently got exposed. Feño was recently talking about this like by like not a great fighter in the middleweight division, and it's so funny because it's just like, dude, did the ref get like Jaron Vallel like looked like he was threatened, his life was threatened if he was gonna stop that match. Like he looked deathly afraid to stop the match, and his brother Abu is just getting beaten to piss. Like he falls down, he drops his mouthpiece.
Destroyed.
Like he got knocked out on his feet and didn't know where he was, and he's like trying to pick up his mouthpiece instead of defend punches, and they let it go on for like another round. And then they stopped it like 5 seconds before, and you just see the ref like you never see the ref apologize for their call. He is profusely apologizing to the Azatars in the corner. Like he knows he wants to get to his bed that night. He is like, what can I do to make this right?
I didn't want to stop it too early, but I also didn't want to stop it too late. Oh my God, what am I doing?
Yep.
I saw a clip of this. It just seems like Ottoman was going crazy and totally lost his feet in an exchange and got punished hard for it.
Yes, yeah.
We love to see people getting punished for poor positioning, especially when they allegedly do a lot of bad things.
Absolutely, allegedly, keyword. Hopefully, let's just hope Steamroller gets to enjoy his bonuses in peace there. Karolina Kowalkiewicz defeated Sylvia Gomez Juarez. Hey, this is my age group right here. 37 strong in the house. What's up, ladies? 37. You doing good? Don't worry, no hate. I got appreciation for both of you. All right, Dan, don't be creepy. What do you got for this fight, Ryan? Anything? Nothing? It's okay. I don't have anything. So I
heard Karolina was fighting, I think yesterday, and that's when I learned Karolina was still in the UFC.
Yeah, right. I know. She actually won her last fight too, which is I completely forgot.
It's good to see her pick up a win here.
Yeah, absolutely. She's a sweetheart. Mike Trezano defeated Sung Woo Choi. Zane Simon's dismay, the cowboy hat that just won't die. Which I completely share the sentiments, by the way, and it's nothing that has nothing to do with American flag, by the way, like Zane Simon, but like Toby Keith would not wear this hat, okay? This that Mike Trezano wears.
I just looked it up. It's so bad.
It is, and apparently
is he doing that ironically?
Well,
is he like a hipster who's like joking?
Well, I don't know, but apparently they gave him like the Li Jing Lang treatment, or like how they do with Li Jing Lang's China stuff, and even including his Chinese necklace, where they just rip it off him. But apparently, like the officials or whatever, I don't know if they're UFC or not, but they ripped the hat away from him, and he was pissed. So in his post fight, he's like, you don't take these with American flag on it. He was like getting really upset, and like he was like getting.
Isn't that a violation of flag code? Like a flagrant violation?
Yeah, and then everybody of course was like getting behind him, right? And I'm just like, oh, poor Zane, and anybody who shares his opinion, which is myself as well. Again, it's not because it's an American flag thing or a cowboy thing, folks. There's plenty of cool things that could be made with either of those patterns, but this particular one, no, it is not a great argument.
It's so bad.
Yeah, it is bad. So it will. So of course he is going to secure his hat's future with his first stoppage finally over Sung Woo Choi.
Now it's his lucky hat. It's never going away.
I mean, first Rick from The Walking Dead, Glenn from The Walking Dead. Then Dong Young Ma, right? Which gave me flashbacks to Glenn from The Walking Dead with all the beatings that he took. And shout to my guy, shouts to the Southpaw podcast, my guy Sam Yang there, Korea Strong. He was just like, I hate it when my Korean brothers, they don't use their defense. And man, we got to add Sung Woo Choi to that pile.
There are Korean brothers that use their defense. Not to call out an entire country, but it is a consistent feature of Korean fighting.
I'm trying not to bring up any boxing examples because you know where I'm going. But yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough. And I love it because, the Just Bleed fan that exists in us all to different varying degrees, who doesn't appreciate, especially when you get, like, Korea and Mexico, Like, those are just the best.
They're insanely tough.
Oh, Korea and Mexico any day. That's Claudio Puelles. Not Claudio Puelles, no, not that guy. Who was the guy that fought UFC 199 against Dong Young Ma? He knocked out...
Polo Reyes?
Polo Reyes, yeah, he knocked out Favola, but yeah, that was a crazy fight,
That was wild.
Yeah, see, that's all you gotta do is racially stereotype. That's the secret to matchmaking, right?
if you see a Korean who can make it through the regional scene into the UFC with his chin intact, you know that guy's tough as hell and can bang.
Yeah, bang Kuntz. Speaking of gambling, by the way, oh my goodness. Yeah, but yeah, good on him, I guess, and sad on that. Montel Jackson defeated Julio Arce. This made me sad. Again, this is my bias. It's a southpaw veteran guy experience. I like Arce's style, and I don't have anything against Jackson. Like, I do think he's got a good high ceiling. I don't think it was like I didn't even think even before this it was a case like Puelles where he's fraudulent, right? You know what I'm saying? Like he's like that guy Shamsatov, the fraudulent Russian. Like
oh yeah, Shamil Gamzatov. Yeah, Montel Jackson. He's like the kind of guy that relies a lot on athleticism, power, and dynamism and all that. But he's not a leg locker. Like he has some tricks. He can fight.
No, and he knows like the value of wrist control, which is good when you have giant Francis Ngannou hands. I mean, the guy is like 5'10", looking bordering on 5'11". He's got like a 75-inch reach. Like he would be above average as a lightweight, where I think he's going to finish his career.
Yeah, dude is insane.
It's big. I mean, Julio Arce, I know he's not the biggest guy, so maybe Montel didn't look as big as I was making it out to be. But Arce used to fight at featherweight and has beaten bigger featherweights before, for what that's worth for scale. Yeah. But it was more of a fade of like, these guys were like, I just feel like they're in the wrong division, and people get mad at me. It's like nothing personal, like to Andre Ewell, who people think I hate Andre Ewell, but it just was he got a bad scorecard against Jonathan Martinez, and he's one of these guys like O'Malley or Montel Jackson where they're tall and lanky, and they're cutting to a lot of weight to a lower weight class. And coincidentally, you tend to see when they continue to do that into their 30s, either durability issues or gas tank issues, which we've seen gas tank with Montel. We've certainly seen durability with O'Malley, and we've seen both those issues with guys like Ewell. You know, and you scale up Corey Anderson, old school, the guy who snapped his shin first in the UFC, long, lanky, lightweight. Again, bad things tend to happen when you press your luck. So it was more just a roll of the dice on that, if anything. But yeah, it didn't go through here.
Yeah, this was a bit of a disappointing one for me too. I'm a big Arce fan. Really love his style. He struggled a lot with the fighting a long southpaw. It was really hard for him to get to the head. He was reaching a lot with his right hand, and wasn't really comfortable until later in the fight boxing his way in. And he seemed kind of uncomfortable with the matchup. He's used to being able to jab on the outside and counter guys coming in, but he had to spend all fight reaching for Jackson here. Yeah, about Jackson's weight class, I think being a gigantic monster is usually a good thing if you're a grappler, but strikers, I think there's kind of diminishing returns on that. If you're huge for your weight class, it might be a better idea to move up and be fast for your other weight class.
It's actually something for featherweight. He'd still be the biggest guy.
For sure, and he'd be a lot faster compared to those guys. That's something I've wondered about with Julio Arce too. Whether bantamweight is the best division for him. Although it's funny to think that since going down, he's like mostly fought a bunch of big guys who are like still taller and longer than him.
They always do that, don't they? Like whether it was Joe Silva or not, they always do that.
It seems to happen a lot.
Especially like someone who's like has to kill themselves for the weight. Like you don't understand how hard it is for some of us to cut this weight. Like you're giving us like
just to fight somebody like 2 heads taller than you anyway.
Dude, one of my Nagas last time I made like 149 pounds, which was insane, right? Like it killed myself. I had to eat like raw vegan the last week of it. I was just like, I got pictures like I was super slim, and like it's such a process for my thick, dense Hawaiian bone body to get down there. And of course, like the first guy I go against is just a fucking tank where I'm like, oh, the 170s are over there. What are you doing here? And like that's it's a mental thing, And of course, the guy thrashed me. Like he would have tech falled me if it was wrestling, right? But it's Naga, so I just get embarrassed with the way I have to like while I'm getting dominated. I look up at the scoreboard and go, oh, that's nice. To be fair though, I made it to the end, and he literally either tapped or injured, and literally just ran through the rest of the people through first. So I'm like, okay, if I'm gonna lose in the first round, that's how it's got to be. You gotta. He was putting people in like they were having to go to the hospital station or whatever after like to get stuff looked at. Shit. Like so, I was like, okay, I don't feel as bad.
No kidding.
Like
I remember my first grappling competition. I was like 12 years old or something, and it was an age group thing too. So like everybody within a year or two of me. And my second match, I look at the guy and like he's huge and very muscular, and he has like a full fucking beard. I'm like, what the fuck?
The fuck?
I'm 12. We can do that? That's possible? Why didn't I get those genes?
Yeah, right. I'm still struggling over here. But yeah, credit to Montel Jackson. I think what threw him off was something that was talked about with the Connor and Poirier later in their series was the lead hand when you have the southpaw versus southpaw. And I don't remember it when I saw tape, but it looked like Jackson did some work because he also had a strong left hand that he would kind of sit back and counter. But his lead hand seemed to throw his checking jab and checking hooks. And again, it doesn't have to be heavy or full shots, but a checking lead hand is such a pain for all stances to deal with when it's a southpaw in particular.
Yeah.
So I think that was something he wasn't expecting. Whereas Uhl was more of a kind of a one-trick pony, not a lot of kicks, pretty rote left hands to the body or head variations, just maybe timing changes, so a little easier. Lastly but not leastly, Carlos Ulberg defeated Nikolai Negumereanu. It looks like Ulberg had a lot of practice playing Pereira as his prodding leg kicks, jabs to checking draw and checking hooks. Played perfectly to Negumereanu, who looks like he compromised his leg and was forced to go even more batshit crazy and defenseless than he already presents himself.
I didn't see the fight, but I caught the knockout on this one. It was a nice little jab hook combo.
Yep. Actually, just so you know, Dan, Ryan doesn't mean run over in a fighting sense. He means literally run over.
Patty Pimblett.
Yes. I don't wish fighters ill, but I mean, it is like kind of like it. I love Chan Sung Jung, for example, but like when he got knocked out by Yair, that was a complete Family Guy style knockout that looked just kind of funny the way he was laying there. Like I feel like Molly and I think actually that did happen to Molly when she was choked unconscious, but I think Molly and Patty are particularly poised for some Family Guy posterizations. Right? Does that make sense?
I can definitely see that. I'm with you there.
All right, that's the whole card. We just hit the 2-hour mark, which is my max, man. Thank you for. I hope I didn't mess up the rest of your day tomorrow by staying late with me, but thank you.
Oh no,
Ryan.
No worries. I was going to be up late anyway.
Thank you, James Kendrick, Hacks, Dan Albert, Kyle Mack, Jin Karasu, Ghost Phantom. We had a new person here, Carlos Guillermo. By the way, Guillermo del Toro, man, that guy just loves dissecting stuff and having organs and like tissue. That's his thing, isn't it? I've been getting into his. I've been finally diving into his library. I'm digging it. I'm just finally. I'm late to the party digging into a lot of his films. I know. Don't tell Kyle Mack. He's gonna fucking stab me. I love Kyle, by the way. I just say that because I respect.
Is that one of the guys he doesn't like? I guess
I don't know if he does or doesn't.
Like,
yeah, I know.
He probably doesn't. He hates most people. Most
I don't
directors.
know what to say. I don't know what to say.
Just don't mention Ari Aster around him.
Yeah, or what's his name? Nolan.
Oh yeah. Christopher Nolan.
Christopher Nolan.
Like
why am I blanking on fucking his name? Of course. Yes. Yeah. But thank you, Ryan. I'll let you at RyanAWagSystema, as you can see on the name tag. Ryan, if you want to plug a fight site, anything you want, sir, the floor is yours before we get out of here.
Yeah. Come check us out on thefightsite.com. We have a Patreon. You can get access to a bunch of video studies, articles, Patreon podcasts. We have a podcast where you can ask us questions. We have a bunch of people from all disciplines of combat sports who know a lot of stuff and are happy to answer your questions. Come check us out. I'm on Twitter at RyanAWagSystema. And thanks for having me on, Dan. It was a lot of fun.
It's a pleasure. It's the least I could do for a site who actually answered my request when I asked you guys to ask Ed Gallo to break down the naked wrestling that took place in the sauna scene in Eastern Promises. For Russia to keep rounding the bases of Russian combat sports you guys love so much, right? I hope I contributed okay.
Oh man, I got to take a look at that. I haven't seen that. That sounds amazing.
It's got to still be up there. It was great. I tortured Ed and made him do it. I don't even know if he saw the movie or was aware of it. But there's a whole naked Viggo Mortensen dingling fight scene that you can go watch.
Incredible.
It's pretty brutal too. And there is wrestling. There's actually arm drags and stuff that he has to break down while Viggo Mortensen's balls are flying everywhere. It's great.
Jesus Christ.
and you don't have to see it, but you can just see it on Ed's face because he's having to talk through it, face himself and try to give actual analysis while just blood and dongs are everywhere. Anyway, it's great. You gotta go check it out.
That's incredible.
Fightsite.com. There we go. There's a plug. There's a plug. All right. Thanks, you guys. Again, it was fun after party edition. It's good that I can actually come on here in a decent mood, have an excellent analyst and a friend, and you guys as friends. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend, and always protect your neck.